The year was 1883. The place was New Mexico territory, and the town called itself Dust Creek, which was the truest thing about it. It was not really a town. It was a scar held open between the high, silent mesas of the Navajo and the raw wound of the silver mines. The wind never stopped. It blew the grit from the south, coating every flat roof, every empty water trough, every weary soul. Heat lived there. It pressed down from a bleached white sky for 8 months of the year, and the sun baked the adobe walls until they cracked. In Dust Creek, the law was a whisper, but survival was a shout. Into this baked emptiness, the stagecoach delivered Evelyn Hart. She was 27 years old. She was a widow from a soft, green part of Pennsylvania, a place that had forgotten what the high desert sun could do. Her husband, Thomas, had been taken by the war some years back, leaving her with a good education and an empty house. She had come west not for gold, not for a husband, but for a living. She was a teacher, the first real teacher Dust Creek had ever bothered to hire. She stepped down from the coach, her black bombazine dress already pale with alkali dust. She held her valise in one hand and her purpose in the other. The town stopped to watch her. Men paused with glasses halfway to their mouths in the saloon. Miners, cavalrymen in faded blue, teamsters, and silent men who had no clear occupation stared. Their faces were hard-bitten, burned brown and red by the sun. They were rough men, and they looked at her not as a person, but as an event. The first educated woman, a woman alone, a woman. Their eyes followed her as she crossed the street, assessing, hungry, curious. She felt the weight of their gaze like a physical thing, heavier than the sun. She found her lodging at the Silver Mule Inn. It was a 2-story building that sagged to the left, as if it was tired of standing. The proprietor was a woman named Clara, wide in the hips and narrow in the eyes. Clara had seen 30 years of this town, and it showed in the lines around her mouth. She handed Evelyn a key. "Room 4, Clara said, her voice as dry as the floorboards. "It is small, but the lock is new. That will be $3 for the week, in advance." Evelyn paid the $3. Clara counted the coins slowly. "A word, miss," she said, not looking up. "You are a teacher. Stick to the books. Do not trust the men in this town. They will offer protection. They will offer comfort. They will offer friendship." She finally looked up, her eyes flat. "They are all liars. Miss, every last one of them is looking for something to break or something to own." Evelyn swallowed. "Thank you for the warning, Mrs. Clara." "It is not a warning," Clara said, turning away. "It is just the weather report." The schoolhouse was a shed that smelled of mules and old dust. She had 10 pupils on the first morning. They were the children of merchants and mine foremen. On the second day, she was teaching the alphabet when the door creaked open. A small boy stood there. He was Navajo. His hair was long and black, his clothes were patched, but he held a piece of slate. He said nothing. He only watched her with wide, dark eyes. Before Evelyn could speak, 2 of the older boys, sons of miners, stood up. "Get out, Injun!" One of them shouted. He was maybe 12 years old. He shoved the Navajo boy. The boy stumbled back, dropping his slate. It cracked on the floor. Evelyn Hart moved faster than she thought she could. She placed herself directly between the boys. "Stop," she commanded. Her voice did not shake. "That is enough. This is a school. Everyone is welcome in this school." The miner's son looked at her, his face a mask of inherited hate. "Not him," he spat. "My PA says they are thieves. He is not welcome." "Your father is not the teacher here," Evelyn said, her hands trembling now, though she hid them in the folds of her skirt. "I am. The boy stays." The miner's son stared at her for a long second. Then he grabbed his hat. "My PA will hear about this." He stormed out. 2 other children gathered their things and followed him, whispering. By noon, the schoolhouse was half empty. The small Navajo boy had vanished during the commotion. He came to see her that evening, Marshal Barton Clay. He was a big man, broad in the shoulder, filling the doorway of her small room at the inn. He wore a fine coat, and his star was polished bright. He held his hat in his hands, but he did not look respectful. He looked like a man assessing property. "Miss Hart," he said, his voice a low, smooth rumble. "I heard there was some trouble at the schoolhouse today." "It was a disagreement. Marshal," Evelyn said, keeping the door only halfway open. "I handled it." "This is not Boston, miss," he said. He smiled, but the smile did not touch his eyes. His eyes were cold, like wet stones. "This is a rough place for a woman, especially one with ideas. The Navajo. They are not to be trusted. They understand strength, nothing more. A woman like you, alone. You require protection." He leaned a little closer. She could smell the bay rum on his skin. "I can provide that protection. I am the law here. I can make sure your time in Dust Creek is comfortable." Evelyn felt a chill despite the suffocating heat. It was not his words. It was the way he looked at her, as if he was already imagining her comfort, and what it would cost her. "Thank you, Marshal," she said, pushing the door closed just a little more. "I believe I can protect myself." His smile tightened. "We will see," he said. He put his hat on and walked away, his boots heavy on the boardwalk. The word spread just as Clara had warned. It traveled from the saloon to the general store, from the smithy to the assay office. The white teacher, the one who defended the Indians, the one who thought she was better than them, the women in the town, the few wives of merchants and miners, looked away when she passed. The men looked at her with something new in their eyes. The curiosity was gone. Now, it was suspicion, or from a sharper, more dangerous interest. She was the woman who said no to Barton Clay. She was the woman who sided with the Navajo. She was the woman who was completely alone. A week later, the sky turned yellow. A sandstorm blew in from the south, a wall of grit that blotted out the sun by 4 in the afternoon. Evelyn dismissed her few remaining pupils early. She tied a scarf over her face and fought her way from the schoolhouse toward the Silver Mule Inn. The wind screamed. It tore at her clothes and pushed her backward. She could not see 10 feet in front of her. The world was gone, replaced by stinging, suffocating dust. She stumbled past the dark alley between the saloon and the land office. A hand grabbed her. It was heavy and hard, clamping over her mouth, pulling her back into the darkness between the buildings. She smelled whiskey and unwashed sweat. 2 men. "Look what the wind blew in," a rough voice slurred near her ear. "The little teacher." She kicked, fighting, her heel connecting with a shin. The man cursed. Another man grabbed her arms, pinning her against the rough wooden wall. "Hold her. Jed, Marshal Clay said she needs to be taught a lesson. Said she needs to learn who runs this town." The first man, Jed, laughed. His hand fumbled at the high collar of her dress. Evelyn screamed into his palm. A muffled, desperate sound, terror, cold and sharp, cut through her. This was real. This was the West. This was what Clara meant. Then there was silence. The wind still howled, but the man holding her went stiff. He made a choking sound, a wet gurgle. He fell away from her, and Evelyn saw the dark shape that had been behind him. The second man turned, pulling his gun. He was too slow. The shadow moved, not like a man, but like a part of the storm itself. There was a sound, dull and heavy, the sound of hard wood meeting bone. The second man collapsed without a word. Evelyn slid down the wall, gasping for air, the sand tearing at her lungs. The shadow solidified. He was a man, a Navajo man. He stood over the 2 attackers, who were now groaning on the ground. He held only a heavy, intricately carved piece of wood, a war club. He looked at the men, his face calm, Then he looked at her. He wore no shirt, only leather leggings and moccasins. His body was lean, built for this harsh land. He stepped toward her. Evelyn flinched, pressing back against the wall, her heart hammering. He stopped. He watched her for a long moment, his face impossible to read in the swirling, dusty gloom. Then, slowly, he reached out a hand. He was not grabbing. He was offering. She hesitated, her breath catching. Then she took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and sure. He pulled her to her feet as if she weighed nothing. He did not let go immediately. He looked at her, his eyes searching her face, checking for injury. His eyes were the only clear thing in the storm. They were dark, not black, but the color of deep volcanic ash, and they held an intelligence that startled her. He was Kale Yazzie. Though she did not know his name, not yet. He only looked at her, this strange white woman who fought for his people's children. He gestured toward the street. He would see her home. He walked with her, not beside her, but a few paces behind, a silent guardian in the storm. The wind whipped around them, but she felt no fear, only the strange, electric presence of him. When they reached the door of the Silver Mule Inn, she turned to him. The weak light from the lobby lamp spilled onto his face, revealing high cheekbones and a proud, unyielding mouth. "Thank you," she said, her voice hoarse from the dust and the fear. He did not nod. He just watched her. He spoke, and his voice was low, softer than the wind but strong enough to cut through it. "Do not fear this land," he said. "It only tests those who live on it." Before she could answer, before she could even ask his name, he turned and melted back into the yellow fog. He was gone. Evelyn fumbled with the door handle and stumbled inside. She locked her door. She washed the grit from her face, but she could not wash away the memory. She sat on her narrow bed, her hands finally shaking. She thought of Barton Clay's cold eyes. She thought of the whiskey breath in the alley. And then she thought of the silent man. She thought of his hand, warm and strong. She thought of his eyes, dark as ash, and she thought of his words. That night, in the small room, with the wind rattling the glass like an angry fist, Evelyn Hart felt a new and dangerous conflict. It was a feeling that was equal parts terror and a deep, unfamiliar longing. The silence of the high desert night was broken 2 days after the storm. It was not the wind this time, but the sound of shouting, the heavy drumming of hooves, and a single, triumphant shot. Evelyn Hart was in the schoolhouse, trying to teach arithmetic to the 3 children who had dared to return. The sound made her blood run cold. She hurried to the door and looked out onto the main street. Marshal Barton Clay was riding in, his posse of miners and saloon loafers behind him. They were moving slow, parading their prize. They were dragging a man behind a rope. He was stumbling, fighting to keep his feet. It was the man from the storm. Evelyn watched in horror as they hauled him into the central square, right in front of the Silver Mule Inn. The town poured out to watch. Men left the saloon, wiping foam from their lips. Women watched from behind curtains. Barton Clay dismounted. He was smiling, his chest puffed with pride. "We got him," Clay bellowed to the assembled crowd. "Found him near the Johnson livery, just like we was told. The Navajo horse thief." He drew his pistol and struck the man across the face with the barrel. The man fell to his knees, but his head snapped back up, his eyes locking on Clay with pure, undiluted hatred. Evelyn saw the fresh cut on his temple, the one she had imagined 1,000 times, had reopened. "What do we do with thieves in Dust Creek?" Clay shouted. "Hang him!" Someone yelled, "String him up!" The crowd, which had been silent and sullen for weeks, was alive now. They had found something they could all agree on. Barton laughed. He uncoiled a bullwhip from his saddle. "In time," he said. "First, he needs a lesson in respect for property." He raised the whip. Evelyn moved. She did not think. She ran from the schoolhouse, her skirts flying, her heart a cold stone in her chest. She pushed through the ring of grinning men, past Jed from the alley, and stopped directly in front of the marshal. "Stop," she said. Her voice was thin, but it carried in the sudden, shocked silence. Barton Clay stared at her as if she were a ghost. He slowly lowered the whip. "Miss Hart," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "This is official marshal's business. Go back to your children." "This is not business," she said, her hands fisted at her sides. "This is a mob. Where is your proof? Where is his trial?" A few men in the crowd laughed. "A trial," one scoffed. "For him." "He was seen," Clay said, his eyes narrowing. "That is proof enough. Now move aside. You are interfering with the law." "This is not the law," Evelyn insisted, planting her feet. "This is murder." She looked at the man on the ground. He was watching her, his expression unreadable, his body tense. He was Cale. "You are a brave woman, teacher," Barton said, "and a foolish one. You have no say here." Evelyn's mind raced. She had no standing, no power, no weapon, only her words. "I do have a say," she said, her voice growing stronger. "By the territorial charter, I am employed to establish a school for all residents of this district, all children. That includes the Navajo children." Clay's face twisted in confusion. "What in blazes does that have to do with this horse thief?" "That boy who came to my school," she improvised, praying it would work. "He is from this man's family. I have spoken with him. If you execute this man in the street, without process, without law, you are telling every Navajo family in this territory that they are not safe here. You are making my work, the work this town hired me to do, impossible. You are obstructing the charter." It was a threadbare argument, a desperate reach, but it was wrapped in the language of law. The crowd murmured. She had challenged him publicly. Clay saw the trap. He could not beat her down in the street, not after she had invoked the charter. But he could not, would not, back down. He looked at her, then at Cale, and a slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "Very well, Miss Hart," he said, coiling his whip. "You want law, you will have it. You believe in this savage so much, you believe he is so important to your school." He stepped closer, towering over her. "Then you can vouch for him." "What do you mean?" she asked, her throat tight. "I mean, I will hold him for the circuit judge. He arrives in, let us say 2 weeks. Until then, this man is your responsibility. He will be locked in the livery stable. You will be his custodian. You will feed him. You will answer for him." The crowd gasped. This was better than a whipping. "And if he escapes, Miss Hart," Clay's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, "you will be charged as his accomplice. You will stand trial for aiding a fugitive. You will lose your school, and I will see you in a territorial prison." He smiled wider. "Do you accept these terms?" "Teacher." This was his trap. She would be ruined either way, if she refused. Her moral stand was empty, and Cale would be whipped, likely killed, if she accepted. She was tying herself to a man the entire town wanted dead. She looked at Cale. His face was bloody, but his eyes were on her. They were proud. They were waiting. They were the same eyes that had saved her life. Evelyn lifted her chin. "I accept the terms." Barton Clay threw his head back and laughed. "So be it. The school teacher is now a jailer." He nodded to his men. "Put him in the stable. The key belongs to Miss Hart. See that she gets it." The story was all over Dust Creek within an hour. The white teacher, the Indian lover. She had shamed herself. She had shamed the town. When Evelyn returned to the Silver Mule Inn, Clara was wiping down the bar, her movements jerky and angry. "You are a fool, girl," Clara said, not looking up. "You just painted a target on your own back. You have not saved him. You have just chained yourself to a dead man. That night, Evelyn's school was empty. The next day, it was empty. No one would send their child to be taught by a woman who chose a Navajo thief over her own kind. She waited until dark. She took a bucket of fresh water, a loaf of bread, and her small tin of medical supplies. She walked to the livery stable. The air was thick with the smell of hay, manure, and old leather. Two of Clay's men were lounging by the door. They watched her with open contempt. "Come to see your pet teacher," one of them sneered. He handed her a large iron key. Evelyn ignored him. She unbolted the heavy door and slipped inside. He was in the last stall, the one reserved for sick horses. They had chained his wrists to a ring in the wall. He was standing, not sitting, a dark shape in the gloom. He watched her approach. She set the bucket down. "I brought water," she said, her voice a whisper. He did not move. "You are bleeding again," she said. She opened her tin. She had clean rags and a small bottle of carbolic. "Please, let me clean that cut." He remained still, but he did not refuse. She stepped closer, into the small space of the stall. She could feel the heat coming off his skin. She dipped a rag in the water and gently touched it to his temple. He did not flinch, but she felt the muscles in his shoulder tense. "Why did you do this?" he asked. His voice was deep, and it vibrated through her. "They were going to kill you," she said, her hands trembling slightly as she worked. "It is my fight." "It was not a fight, it was a mob." She finished cleaning the wound. It was deep. "You saved me. In the sandstorm, I owed you a debt." He turned his head, his dark, ash-colored eyes finding hers. "A white person's debt," he said, his voice flat. "It is a strange thing. It binds us both now." "I am bound by my word," she said, pulling back. "I told the marshal I would be responsible for you." She offered him the bread. He looked at it for a long moment before taking it. His fingers brushed hers. His skin was rough, calloused. She lingered, not knowing what else to do. "I am a teacher," she said, the words feeling small and useless in this dark place. "I believe in knowledge. I believe it can save people. It can build bridges between worlds." He looked at the iron chain on his wrist, then at her. "Your knowledge is words in a book," Cale said. His voice was not unkind, but it was heavy with a truth she had never known. "Wisdom is knowing the land, knowing the heart of men like Clay." He lifted his chained wrist a few inches. "Your knowledge cannot save a soul that is already in chains." Evelyn had no answer. His words settled in her heart, a cold, hard stone of truth. She left the stable, the sound of the bolt sliding home echoing behind her. 2 nights passed. The town treated her like a leper. She was isolated, a prisoner in her own room. The silence of the town was almost as loud as the sandstorm. It was late, well past midnight. The town was dark. Evelyn was in her bed, wearing her nightgown, but she was not asleep. She was listening. She heard it, a boot scrape on the boardwalk outside, then silence, then a sound at her door. Not a knock, a key turning in the lock. Her heart stopped. She scrambled out of the bed, pulling the sheet around her just as the door swung open. Marshal Barton Clay stood in the doorway. He was not wearing his star. His coat was unbuttoned, and he smelled strongly of whiskey. "Miss Hart," he slurred, a lazy, predatory smile on his face. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "I came to see how you were. You have been so unfriendly, hiding in your room." "Get out," Evelyn said. She backed away until she hit the wall. Now, he said, advancing on her. "I am the law. I am just checking on a citizen." He unbuckled his gun belt and let it drop to the floor. "A citizen who needs my protection." "I do not need your protection," she said, her voice shaking. "I think you do," he said. "You made a fool of me in the street. You took in that savage. You need to be taught a lesson. Evelyn, you need to learn how this town really works. And you need to pay for my trouble." He reached for her, grabbing the sheet. "You have been so good at taking in strays. Take me in." Evelyn screamed. She grabbed the heavy porcelain water pitcher from her nightstand and threw it at him with all her strength. He ducked, and it shattered against the wall. "You little—" He lunged. The window of her room exploded inward. Glass and wood sprayed across the floor as a dark shape crashed through the frame. It was Cale. He landed in a low crouch, his eyes blazing. He was bleeding from his arms and shoulders, where he had ripped the chain and its mooring from the stable wall. The broken manacles still hung from his wrists. Barton spun around, his eyes wide with shock, his hand dropping to his hip for a gun that was no longer there. Cale moved. He was not the quiet, chained prisoner. He was a force of nature. He crossed the small room in one step and slammed into the marshal. Barton's head hit the wall with a sickening crack. Cale did not stop. He hit him twice. Savage, precise blows to the gut that drove the air from the marshal's lungs. Barton Clay slid down the wall and lay still, unconscious. Silence filled the room, broken only by Evelyn's gasping breaths and the heavy sound of Cale's. He turned to look at her. He was covered in sweat and blood. He looked at the broken window, at the marshal on the floor. "He will wake," Cale said, his voice raw. You broke out," she whispered, unable to move. "He will wake," Cale repeated. "And when he does, he will tell them I escaped. He will tell them you helped me. He will have his excuse. He will hunt us. He will hang us both." The cold, hard truth of it hit her. Her word, her responsibility. She was an accomplice. "What do we do?" Cale ripped a strip of cloth from her curtain and quickly, expertly, bound the marshal's hands. "We run," he said. He grabbed her arm. His grip was like iron. "Get your coat, your boots, now. We do not have time." She fumbled for her things, her fingers numb. Where can we go?" "North," he said, pulling her toward the shattered window. "To the mountains. It is the only place he will not look first. He will expect us to take horses. We go on foot, into the dark." He lowered her out the window into the deep shadows of the back alley. He followed, landing beside her as silently as a cat. He grabbed her hand. "We must go!" Evelyn Hart, the teacher from Pennsylvania, did not look back. She ran with the Navajo warrior, leaving the sleeping town of Dust Creek behind them, disappearing into the vast, cold emptiness of the New Mexico night. The journey had begun. The dark was absolute. Cale did not run. He moved across the broken land like water, flowing over rock and through thorny brush. He held Evelyn's hand, his grip not cruel but unbreakable. She was a liability, a creature of paved streets and gas lamps. And she knew it. Her thin boots, the only ones she had grabbed, were never meant for this. They tore on the sharp rock. Her skirt snagged on mesquite, ripping with a sound that seemed as loud as a gunshot in the silence. She fell hard, her knee striking a stone, and she cried out. Cale stopped instantly. He did not pull her up. He turned, and in the faint starlight she saw him crouched, listening. He was listening for any sound of pursuit, any sound other than her own pained gasp. The wind was the only thing that moved. He seemed satisfied. He turned back to her, his face a mask of shadows. He pulled her to her feet, his strength effortless. He did not speak. He simply took her hand again and moved on, this time pulling her slightly, forcing her to keep a pace that stole her breath. They moved for hours. Evelyn lost track of time. Her world shrank to the dark shape of his back, the vice of his hand, and the burning pain in her lungs. She was no longer a teacher. She was no longer a widow. She was just a thing being pulled through the darkness, running from a fate she could barely comprehend. Just before the false dawn, when the sky was a pale, sickly gray, she stumbled and fell again. This time, she could not get up. She tried, but her legs were water. A violent shiver racked her body. It started in her chest and shook her so hard her teeth rattled. "I cannot," she whispered, the words tearing at her dry throat. "I must rest, just for a moment." Cale knelt beside her. He put his hand on her forehead. His rough, calloused skin was a shock against her own, which was burning. He did not need the light to see it. He could feel the fever rolling off her. It was the shock, the cold desert night, the exhaustion. He looked back toward Dust Creek, miles away. Then north to the mountains. He made a decision. He turned, bent low, and gestured for her to climb onto his back. "What?" she breathed, uncomprehending. "We cannot stay here. We are too exposed." His voice was low, urgent. He put her arms around his neck and lifted her. She weighed almost nothing. He carried her. He walked for another hour, his steps steady and sure, even with her weight. She drifted in and out of consciousness. She was aware of the solid strength of his shoulders, the rhythm of his breathing, the strange, clean scent of his skin, like dust and juniper. She was burning with fever, yet freezing in the dry, cold air. He finally stopped in a shallow arroyo, a wash carved by ancient rains. It offered little shelter, but it was below the level of the plain. He eased her to the ground. She was delirious now. Murmuring, he vanished. She was alone for a moment, terrified he had left her, but he returned. He had found a horse. It was a lean pinto, tethered in a stand of cottonwoods she had not even seen. It had a saddle, a waterskin, and a thick, woven blanket roll tied behind it. It was his. He must have kept it hidden, far from the town. He gave her a mouthful of water, forcing her to drink. Then he stripped leaves from a willow branch growing in the arroyo. He chewed them into a pulp, his expression focused, and pressed the bitter paste against her lips. "Eat," he commanded. "It will break the fever." She obeyed, the taste acrid and sharp. He soaked a rag in water and laid it on her forehead. As the sun began to climb, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple, the real cold of the desert night settled in. Her shivers became uncontrollable. The willow had not worked yet. He knew she would not last until morning light without warmth. A fire was a terrible risk. It was a beacon. But death from cold was a certainty. He found a small overhang of rock, barely a hollow, but it would shield a small flame from the wind. He used his horse's saddlebags, pulling out a fire drill. Within minutes, his hands moving in a blur, he had a small, bright ember glowing in a knot of dry wood. He fed it tiny twigs, building a fire that was almost smokeless, hot and contained. Evelyn was fading, her skin pale, her lips blue. He unrolled the blanket. It was heavy wool, woven in patterns of red and black and white. He wrapped it around her, but it was not enough. He sat down, his back against the rock, and pulled her into his arms. He pulled her tight against his chest, wrapping the blanket around them both. This was the moment. She was barely lucid, caught in a fever dream. She knew only the cold, and then the heat. The heat was him. He was a wall of solid warmth. She pressed her face against his chest, seeking it, her body instinctively burrowing closer. He held her. He did not move. He was a statue of rock and heat. She could feel the steady, slow beat of his heart beneath her ear. She could feel his breath, warm and even, stirring the hair at her temple. His chin rested on the top of her head. He was holding her as he might hold a child, or a lover. The line was blurred. There was nothing in the world but the crackle of the small fire, the vast silence of the desert, and the man who held her, fear and desire. She was terrified of the men hunting them, terrified of this man who was a stranger. Yet her body craved his closeness, craved the life and the heat he was pouring into her. She drifted to sleep, safe for the first time since she had left Pennsylvania, held in the arms of a man the world called a savage. When she woke, the sun was high. The fever had broken. She was slick with sweat, but her mind was clear. She was lying in a small cave. The horse was tethered near the mouth, eating dry grasses Cale had gathered. He was sitting across from her, sharpening his knife on a smooth stone. The broken manacles were gone from his wrists. He had somehow broken the iron links. He saw her watching him. He stopped. "You are awake," he said. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice a dry rasp. "In the mesas, north of the town. We are safe for a short time." He offered her the water skin. She drank deeply. She looked at him. The fire was gone. In the clear light of day, she saw the exhaustion in his face, the deep cuts on his arms where he had torn himself free. "Why?" she asked. He looked up from the stone. "Not just in the alley," she clarified, her voice gaining strength. "Last night, you were free. You could have been halfway to Arizona by now. Why come back for me?" He set the knife down. He looked at her, his dark eyes seeming to see straight through her, to the foundations of her soul. "When I was in that stall," he said, his voice quiet, "I waited. I knew Clay would come for you. It is what he does. He breaks things that are not his. But why did you care? Why save me?" Cale looked down at his own hands, then back at her. "Because you looked at me like a man," he said, "not like an animal. When you stood in that square, you were a fool. You spoke of laws that do not exist out here. You spoke of bridges that are not real, but you were a fool who saw a man, not a Navajo, not a thief, a man." He picked up the knife. "That is a rare thing. It is worth saving." Evelyn had no answer for that. They stayed in the cave that day, resting. Cale tended the horse. He gathered roots and berries. He said little. Evelyn watched him, this man of profound silences and devastating action. That afternoon, the sky changed. The white, bleached heat turned to a dark, heavy gray. The air became still and electric. Then, the first drops came. Within an hour, it was a deluge. The first rain of the season had arrived. It came down not in drops, but in sheets, a roar of water that turned the dry arroyos into muddy, raging rivers. A waterfall poured over the mouth of their cave, sealing them inside. They were trapped. For 2 days, the world was water and sound. They were in a small, dry bubble, while the desert outside was being washed clean. The forced intimacy was unnerving. There was nothing to do, no escape. They had to wait. The silence between them stretched. On the second night, Evelyn spoke, her voice quiet under the roar of the rain. "I was married," she said. Cale did not look at her. He was staring at the wall of water. "I know. You are a widow." "His name was Thomas," she said, the name feeling strange on her tongue. "He was a good man, a kind man. He taught literature at a small college." She pulled her knees to her chest. "He died in the war, at Gettysburg. He believed in the Union. He believed in what he was fighting for." She paused. "When he died, the world went quiet. Green, Pennsylvania felt like a tomb. I came west because I was suffocating. I thought if I came somewhere hard, somewhere that was truly alive, I might feel alive again. I did not know what I was asking for." Cale was silent for a long time. The rain lessened, turning into a steady drumbeat. "I had a brother," he said. His voice was different, softer. "His name was Ashki. He was younger than me. He taught me to track. He could read the stones, read the wind. He knew where the deer would be, always." He turned to look at her, and his eyes were full of a pain so deep it shocked her. "He was shot by soldiers, blue coats, like your husband's. They were not fighting a war. They were protecting a silver mine that was poisoning our water. Ashki was standing on our land, given by treaty. He was shot for standing there. They said he looked hostile." He looked away. You speak of knowledge, of books. Your husband died for an idea. My brother died for dirt. For this dirt. For the water that runs in it. The gulf between their worlds was vast, a canyon of blood and history. Yet, in that cave, their grief was the same. It was the same shape. Evelyn felt tears welling. Not for Thomas, not for herself, but for the brother she never knew, and for the man who sat across from her. She moved, crawling the small space between them. She sat before him. She did not know what to do. So she reached out and touched the wound on his temple, the one Barton Clay had given him, the one she had cleaned. He looked at her, his breath catching. He saw the tears on her face. He saw the shared loneliness. She saw the same in him. She leaned forward. He did not pull away. He met her halfway. Their lips touched. It was not a kiss of passion, not the desperate heat of the fever dream. It was a kiss of profound, shattering recognition. It was salt from her tears, and the taste of willow bark, and the faint, cold smell of the rain. It was tentative, and then it was deep. It was the first honest thing that had happened to her in years. It was two worlds, two griefs, two solitudes, meeting in the dark. The barrier of race, of law, of fear. It all dissolved in that one desperate, human touch. When they broke apart, the rain had stopped. The morning of the third day dawned bright and cruelly clean. The desert was washed new, the air sharp and cold. Evelyn felt a moment of peace, a strange, impossible hope. Cale was outside, checking the horse, his body silhouetted against the bright blue sky. Suddenly, he froze. He dropped low, pulling the horse back into the shadows of the cave. "What is it?" Evelyn whispered, her heart seizing. He put a finger to his lips. He listened. Then she heard it, faint but growing, the rhythmic beat of many horses, galloping, coming fast. Cale's face was grim. He moved to the cave mouth, peering from the edge. He watched for a long minute. "It is him," he said. "Clay, and at least 10 men. The rain washed away our tracks. But he is a hunter. He knows this land, too." Evelyn's blood ran cold. "What do? We are trapped." "No," Cale said. He turned to her, his eyes intense. He was a warrior again. He grabbed her. "You are not. He wants me. He wants to hang me. He wants you. For himself." He pulled her to the pinto. "You will ride. You will ride north. Follow this canyon. It will fork. Take the fork that goes east. Hide in the rocks. Do not move until dark." "No," she said, pulling back. "I will not leave you. I am with you in this. I will not run." "You will," he said, his voice hard. He grabbed her by the waist and threw her onto the saddle. "You will live. This is not your fight. It is mine. I am buying you time. Go." He handed her the reins. "I will lead them west. They will follow me. They will not look for you." "Cale, no!" Tears streamed down her face. He looked up at her, his hand on the horse's neck. He allowed himself 1 second. He touched her boot. "You saw me as a man. Evelyn Hart, now. Let me be one." He struck the horse's rump with a hard slap. The pinto, startled, leaped forward, galloping out of the cave and into the canyon. Evelyn screamed his name. She tried to turn the horse, but it was running, scared and fast. She held on, sobbing. She rode for a minute. Then she could not stand it. She had to see. She reined the horse in on a small rise, a 1/4 mile away, and looked back. She saw them, Barton Clay and his posse, riding hard, guns drawn. They thundered past the cave, not even stopping. And she saw Cale. He was on foot, running west, up the side of the opposite mesa. He was a clear target, a deliberate diversion. "There he is," she heard Clay's distant shout echo across the canyon. "Get the horse thief!" They swarmed him. They circled him. Cale did not try to run further. He turned. She saw him pull his knife. He fought. He took 2 of them down, pulling them from their saddles. But it was too many. She watched, helpless, as one man swung his rifle like a club. She saw Cale go down. They surrounded him, even from this distance. She saw the dark stain spread, blood on the newly washed sand. They were kicking him. Then they tied his hands and feet and threw him over a saddle like a sack of grain. Elec, a muffled, heartbroken wail. Evelyn stifled her scream in her hand. They had him. They had captured him. He had saved her, and they had him. She turned the horse, and she rode north, the tears blinding her. The image of his blood on the sand burned into her mind forever. She rode for 3 hours, the pinto horse moving with a grim, steady purpose. Cale's horse. She rode east, as he had commanded, but her heart was a stone. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his blood on the sand. She saw the heavy boot, the swing of the rifle. She saw them throw him over the saddle. He had bought her life with his freedom, a freedom he knew would mean his death. He had told her to hide, to save herself. But as the sun climbed high, casting a brutal, shadowless light over the land, she knew she could not. To ride on, to save her own skin while he was taken back to be hanged, was not just cowardice. It was a betrayal of the only act of true, selfless honor she had ever witnessed. He had seen her as a person. She would do the same for him. She turned the pinto south. She would not ride into Dust Creek, not on his horse, not in broad daylight. She found a deep, hidden arroyo, the same one where he had first tended her fever, and left the horse there with the water skin. She walked the last 2 miles, approaching the town from the east, as if she were a lost and desperate traveler, which was exactly what she was. She entered the town, her dress torn, her face streaked with dirt and dried tears. The few people on the street stared at her. They looked at her as if she were a ghost. She walked directly to the Silver Mule Inn. Clara was sweeping the boardwalk. When she saw Evelyn, her hand went to her mouth and the broom clattered to the ground. "Dear God," Clara breathed. Clay said he took you, that you were gone." "Where is he?" Evelyn's voice was a rasp. "They have him," Clara said, her eyes wide with fear and something else. Something that looked like pity. "In the marshal's back cell. They brought him in an hour ago. He is not good. Evelyn." The door of the marshal's office burst open. Barton Clay stood there. His smile was gone. His face was a mask of cold fury. He was not surprised to see her. He had known she would have to return. "Miss Hart," he said, his voice flat. "So good of you to return. You have saved me the trouble of a manhunt." "I was abducted, Marshal," Evelyn said, her voice shaking but her eyes locked on his. "He forced me from my room. I escaped him in the chaos of the storm." Clay walked slowly toward her, his thumbs hooked in his belt. He stopped, close enough for her to smell the bay rum again. "That is a fine story, teacher," he said, his voice low. "A fine, neat lie. But I was there. I saw him lead us away from you. I saw him save your life while you rode off on his horse, a horse you have, no doubt, hidden somewhere close." He knew. He did not have proof, but he knew. "You aided the escape of a wanted fugitive," Clay said, his voice rising for the benefit of the watching town. "You are an accomplice to horse theft and assault." "And you," Evelyn said, her voice shaking but rising to match his, "are a liar. You attacked me in my room. You are the one who broke the law." Clay's hand moved so fast she did not see it. He backhanded her across the face. The sound was like a whip crack. Evelyn fell to the dusty boardwalk, the side of her face exploding in pain. "That is for resisting arrest." Clay spat. "And for lying to a federal marshal." He nodded to Jed, who had come running. "Take her. Put her in the front cell. She can watch her savage hang in the morning." "You cannot," Clara shouted, moving to help Evelyn. "You cannot just arrest her. She has rights." "She has no rights," Clay sneered. "She is a traitor to her own kind. As for you, Old woman, you go back inside before I arrest you for obstruction. Evelyn was dragged to the jail. It was a small, hot building. The back cell, where Cale was dark. The front cell was empty. Jed shoved her inside and locked the door. The town board has already voted, Clay said to her through the bars. He was calm now. His control returned. He was enjoying this. Your teaching charter is revoked. You are to be held until the circuit judge arrives to stand trial. By that time, he smiled. Your star witness will be long gone. He left her. The heat in the cell was suffocating. She sat on the hard cot, the side of her face throbbing. She was a fool. She had walked right into his trap. She had not saved Cale. She had only gotten herself caged. She could hear, from the back of the jail, the sound of a man breathing in short, pained gasps. It was Cale. He was alive. She waited. Hours passed. The sun set, and the cell became even more stifling. She had no water. Late, long after midnight, she heard a sound, a key in the outer lock. The door opened, and Clara slipped in, carrying a small lantern and a bucket of water. "Clara," Evelyn whispered. "Hush, girl," Clara said, her face grim. She pushed the bucket and a tin cup through the bars. "Drink. You look like hell." Evelyn drank, the water like life itself. "How did you get in?" "I have lived in this town for 30 years, Clara said, her voice a low growl. "I used to clean this office. I know where the spare key is. Clay is a fool. He is at the saloon, celebrating his victory." Evelyn gripped the bars. "Clara, you have to help me. He is going to hang him." "Of course he is," Clara said. "That is the plan. It was always the plan." It was not about a horse, was it? Clara looked around the dark office, then back at Evelyn. "No," she said. "It was never about a horse. It is about silver. The Apex Mining Company wants a new route to the railroad, a fast route. The one they have now takes 4 days. They want one that takes 2. "And the route?" Evelyn asked, a cold dread settling in her stomach. "It goes straight through the Blue Valley," Clara said. "Navajo land, treaty land, Cale's land. He is not just any Navajo girl. He is the one who speaks for his people. He is the one who has refused to sell, refused to move. He is the one who went to Santa Fe last year and spoke to the army. They cannot dig as long as he is there. So, they arranged for him to be gone." "The horse theft was a lie, a setup." "Of course," Clara said. "Jed and his friend, the ones who attacked you, they are on the mining company payroll. Clay gets a 10% cut of all the silver that travels that new route. They just needed Cale to disappear. You were a complication." Evelyn's mind raced. "The proof! There must be proof! A map! A deed!" "In the land office," Clara said. "Clay keeps the records. He has new maps. I heard Jed bragging about it, how they fixed the borders." "I need that map," Evelyn said. "I need proof. If I can get proof, the federal judge—" "The judge in Santa Fe," Clara scoffed. "He is 2 days away. The hanging is at noon tomorrow." Irene felt the floor drop out from under her. "Tomorrow." Clay is not waiting for a judge. He is holding his own trial at noon, and the execution is at noon and 1 minute. It is all for show. A small sound came from the back, a scrape. "Teacher." Emhayan hurried to the back of her cell, pressing against the bars that separated her from the dark corridor. Cale, is that you?" "I am here." His voice was a raw whisper, thick with pain. "He is awake," Evelyn said to Clara. Clara brought the lantern closer. She held it up to the bars of the back cell. Evelyn saw him. He was chained to the wall, sitting on the floor. His face was a swollen, bruised ruin. One eye was closed. His shirt was caked in dried blood. He looked broken. "God in heaven," Clara whispered. "Cale, can you move?" Evelyn asked, her voice desperate. He slowly, agonizingly, pulled himself to his feet. Using the chains. I can stand, he breathed. Clara, you have to get me out of here. Tonight. And then what, girl? Clara demanded. You walk out, he is chained. The town is against you. We need proof, and we need a distraction. Evelyn's mind was working, the fear being burned away by a cold, sharp anger. Clara, you know this town. The land office. Is there a back way? A window, but it is always locked. Not anymore. A new voice, small, quiet. A boy had slipped in behind Clara. He was small, with long black hair. It was Toma, the Navajo boy from the school, Cale's nephew. Toma. Cale's voice was suddenly strong. Get away from here. It is not safe. I followed her, Toma said, pointing at Clara. I saw them take you, teacher woman. I saw them take my uncle. He looked at Evelyn. The window is not locked. I cleaned the office. I unlocked it this morning. Evelyn looked at Clara. It is a sign. It is a trap, Clara said. It is a chance, Evelyn countered. Clara, I need you to do two things. First, ride to the arroyo. Cale's pinto is there. Bring it and get another horse, a fast one. Tie them behind the smithy, ready to run. And the second thing, I need you to write a letter. Evelyn spoke quickly. To the federal judge in Santa Fe, Judge Silas Wright. Tell him everything, the forged maps, the Apex mine, Barton Clay's corruption, the false arrest, the planned execution. Tell him Cale is being held and I'm in the jail. Tell him if he does not come, we will be dead. And how does this letter get to Santa Fe? The morning stage. It leaves at 6. Give the driver this. Evelyn pulled her small gold locket from her neck. The last thing she had from Thomas. Give him this and $20. Tell him it is life and death. Tell him to ride like hell and not to give it to anyone but the judge himself. Clara looked at the locket, then at Evelyn's determined face. She nodded. All right, I will do it. But what about you and him? Toma, Evelyn said, turning to the boy. The key for my cell. Is it on the wall? Toma nodded. He darted to the marshal's desk and grabbed the ring of keys. He fumbled, his small hands shaking, until he found the one for her cell. He unlocked the door. Evelyn was free. Now, she said, we get the map. Toma, show me. Then we get him. She grabbed the key to Cale's cell from the ring. She and Toma slipped out the back door. Clara went to write the letter. The land office was dark. Toma led her to the back window. It slid open with a soft groan. They climbed inside. Where? Evelyn whispered. Toma pointed to a large, flat drawer in a cabinet. Evelyn pulled it open. Maps, dozens of them. She lit a match, shielding it with her body. She saw the county map, and under it, a new one. Apex Mining Survey Route. It was freshly drawn. The ink was dark. The boundary lines were sharp, and they cut straight through the Blue Valley. At the bottom were two signatures, Barton Clay, Marshal, and a man named Silas Croft, Apex Mining. This is it. She rolled it up and tucked it into her dress. They crept back to the jail. Clara was gone. Cale was waiting. Evelyn put the key in the lock of his cell. It was a heavy, old lock. It groaned. He is coming, Cale whispered. Evelyn heard it. Boots on the boardwalk. Jed, he was coming back. Toma, hide, Evelyn whispered, pushing him under the desk. She locked Cale's cell, put the key back in the lock, and ran, locking herself back in her own cell. Sliding the key ring back onto the hook by the door just as Jed walked in. He was carrying a tin plate of food. He looked at Evelyn in her cell, then at the dark mass in the back. Last meal. Savage. He grunted, shoving the plate through Cale's bars. He looked at Evelyn. You are next, teacher. After he swings. He laughed and left, locking the main door. Evelyn let out a breath she had been holding for a minute. "Clara has the horses," she whispered to Cale. "She is sending word to Santa Fe. I have the map. I have the proof." "It does not matter," Cale said. "He will not let us live to show it." "He is not holding a trial to hang you, Cale," Evelyn said, her voice cold. "He is holding it to silence me. He will claim I was a hysterical woman. He will use your execution as a show of his power, and that is his mistake." "What are you going to do?" "He wants a show," Evelyn said. "I am going to give him one." Noon. The sun was a hammer. The entire town was gathered in the square. The raw, new gallows stood waiting. Barton Clay, his star polished, stood on the steps of his office. Jed and another man dragged Cale out. He was chained, and he could barely walk. "Eti, people of Dust Creek," Clay shouted. "We are here for justice. This man, Cale Yazzie, is charged with horse theft, assault, and the abduction of Miss Evelyn Hart. The evidence is clear. The sentence is death by hanging." "Where is his trial?" Evelyn shouted. The crowd parted. She was standing there, clean, her hair brushed, her torn dress mended. She looked like the teacher she was. Clay's face purpled. "Miss Hart, you are a prisoner. You will be silent." "I will not," she said, walking forward. "I was not abducted. I was rescued. I was rescued from you, Marshal, after you broke into my room." The crowd gasped. They looked from Evelyn to Clay. "She is lying," Clay roared. "She is a known Indian lover. She's mad." "Am I?" Evelyn pulled the rolled map from her dress. "Or am I the only one who knows why you are doing this? Is it for a horse, or is it for this?" She unrolled the map. "A forged land deed, a backroom deal with the Apex Mine to steal Navajo land. Is this your justice, Marshal, or is this just greed?" The crowd, who hated the mines as much as they feared the Navajo, surged forward, murmuring. "That is a lie," Clay shrieked. "She stole that. Seize her. Hang him. Hang him now." He drew his pistol. Jed and the other man grabbed Cale and shoved him toward the gallows. This was the moment. "Clara," Evelyn whispered. A shot rang out. Not from the crowd. From the roof of the Silver Mule Inn. "Clara!" She fired a shotgun blast into the air. The crowd screamed and dove for cover. Horses reared. It was perfect chaos. In that 1 second, Evelyn acted. She had Clara's small derringer in her hand. She ran forward and fired, not at Clay, but at the chains between Cale's hands. The bullet struck the link. It was not enough to break it, but it was a shock. Cale did not wait. As Jed turned, confused, Cale spun, his legs sweeping the man's feet out from under him. He brought his chained fists down on the other guard's head, dropping him cold. Clay, recovered from the shock, saw Evelyn. He saw her gun. He raised his own pistol and fired at her. "No!" a voice cried. Another shotgun blast from the roof. This time, it was not in the air. The shot caught Barton Clay in the shoulder, spinning him around. He screamed in pain and rage. He looked up at the roof, saw Clara standing there, and fired wildly. Evelyn watched in frozen horror. The bullet struck Clara in the chest. Clara looked down, surprised. She looked at Evelyn, a small, sad smile on her face. Then she crumpled and pitched forward, falling from the roof to the boardwalk below. "Clara!" Evelyn's scream was a raw wound. Cale was at her side. He had Jed's pistol. He grabbed Evelyn's arm, his grip like steel, pulling her from her shock. "He will kill us. We must go. Now. We honor her by living." He fired twice toward the marshal's office. Scattering Clay's men, he pulled Evelyn through the screaming, panicked crowd, toward the alley behind the smithy. The horses were there. 2 of them. Clara. She had done it. Cale threw Evelyn onto the mare, then vaulted onto his own pinto. He did not look back. He kicked the horse into a gallop, pulling Evelyn's horse by the reins. They thundered out of Dust Creek. a cloud of dust rising behind them, leaving the town, the gallows, and the body of their only friend behind them. They did not ride alone. In the screaming chaos of the square, as Barton Clay's men dove for cover, Cale had seen Clara fall. He had seen the life still in her eyes, a spark of defiance. While Evelyn fired the Derringer, he had not run. He had vaulted the smithy's trough, grabbed Clara's broken body from the boardwalk, and thrown her over the saddle of the mare before Evelyn even had her foot in the stirrup. "We do not leave our friends," he had roared, his voice cutting through her grief. Now they rode north, 3 souls fleeing a town that had become a nest of vipers. Clara was a dead weight in front of Evelyn, groaning with every jarring step of the horse. The bullet had taken her in the chest, high on the right side. It was bad. Blood soaked the front of Evelyn's dress, hot and sticky. "We cannot keep this pace," Evelyn shouted to Cale, who rode beside them. "She will not survive it." Cale's face was a mask of grim determination, his own wounds from the jail forgotten. "We must," he said. "They will be on us before sundown." But he knew she was right. Clara was dying, and the fast pace was killing her quicker. He changed direction, veering east into the broken maze of canyons. He was heading for the cave. They reached it as the sun bled out over the western rim. The place was as they had left it. Cale lifted Clara from the saddle as if she were a child. He carried her inside, to the same spot where Evelyn had shivered with fever. Evelyn tore strips from her petticoat. The wound was deep. "We must get the bullet out," she said, her voice shaking. Cale shook his head. "We cannot. We have no knife for it, no whiskey. We can only stop the bleeding." He built a small fire, the same as before. He heated his knife, the one he had taken from Jed, until the blade was glowing red. "Hold her," he commanded. Evelyn held Clara's hand, whispering to her, though she was barely conscious. Cale pressed the hot blade to the edges of the wound. The smell of seared flesh filled the cave. Clara screamed, a thin, terrible sound, and then went limp, but the bleeding slowed to a dark, sluggish ooze. "I have done what I can," Cale said, his voice heavy. He sat back, the strength leaving him in a rush. He was wounded, exhausted, and now a fugitive with 2 women to protect. Evelyn tended to him then, cleaning the cuts on his face and arms. Her touch no longer tentative. It was the touch of a partner, a fellow soldier. They were bound, not by a debt, but by blood. Clara's blood. Clara was delirious for 2 days. Evelyn and Cale took turns, holding the waterskin to her cracked lips, bathing her face. They were trapped. They could not move her, and they could not leave her. "They are hunting us," Cale said on the 3rd morning. He had been to the ridge. "I saw dust, far to the south. Clay is not giving up." "Then we have to go," Evelyn said. "She cannot ride," Cale said, looking at Clara. "She will die if she stays here. They will find us. She will die if she rides." Evelyn closed her eyes. She gave me this chance. She saved us. We must let her choose." She knelt by the older woman. Clara, can you hear me?" Clara's eyes fluttered open. They were milky with pain, but the sharp intelligence was still there. "Heard every word," she rasped. "You are a fool, girl. Always were." "We have to move," Evelyn said, her voice thick. "They are coming." "This land, it takes everyone," Clara whispered. She tried to smile. "I would rather die, looking at the sky. Not in this hole. Get me on the horse." Cale looked at Evelyn and nodded once. They would go. "Where?" Evelyn asked. "Blue Shadow Valley," Cale said. "It is my home. It is where my people are, or what is left of them. It is 3 days' ride, if we are lucky, if the horses hold, if she holds." The journey was a new kind of hell. It was worse than the run in the dark, worse than the jail. They moved slowly, trying to spare Clara the pain, but every step was agony. They were pursued. They could not risk a fire. They ate dry roots that Cale dug from the earth and drank sparingly from their water skin. On the second day, a sandstorm hit. It was a howling, yellow monster, like the one that had first thrown Evelyn and Cale together. But this time, they were exposed. With a dying woman. They huddled behind a rock, the horses screaming, the sand scouring their skin. Cale covered both women with his own body and the heavy wool blanket, a silent shield against the world. When the storm passed, Evelyn's education began. She was no longer a teacher. She was a student. The desert was her classroom. "You ride like a sack of feed," Cale told her, his voice rough but not unkind. He was teaching her to ride his pinto, a true war horse, trained to respond to the shift of a knee, the pressure of a heel. You do not sit on him. You become part of him. Feel his muscles. Breathe when he breathes. She learned the fear of the animal, the fear of the land, was replaced by a sharp, desperate focus. She learned to ride. He taught her to shoot. He had Jed's pistol. "You fired at my chains," he said. "You were brave, and you were lucky. Never count on luck. You aim, you breathe out. You squeeze. You do not pull. You let the gun surprise you." She practiced on a piece of dead cactus. The first shot was wild. The second was low. The third hit the center. He nodded, a small, rare sign of approval. That night, he taught her the stars. There was no moon, and the sky was a spray of white fire. "That is the one who stands still," he said, pointing to the North Star. "She guides us, the men in Dust Creek. They have maps, they have compasses, but they are blind. They look at the paper. They do not look up." She watched him, his face turned to the sky, the starlight carving his profile from the darkness. He was not just a man. He was part of the land, part of the sky. He was as real as the rock they sat on. Their feelings grew in the silence. There was no room for flirtation, for the soft words she had known in Pennsylvania. Their bond was forged in shared pain, in desperation, and in a profound, unspoken respect. But she could feel the fear. What was this? He was a Navajo. She was a white woman, an outlaw. He had a people, a history she could never understand. She had a past that was just as foreign to him. "You are afraid," he said. He was not asking. They were sitting by the horses, sharing a small piece of dried meat. Clara was asleep, her breathing shallow. "Yes," Evelyn admitted. "I am afraid of Clay. I am afraid of what will happen to us. I am afraid of this." She waved her hand, indicating the vast, empty darkness. "And of you?" He looked at her. "I do not frighten you." "No," she corrected. "You do not. What I feel frightens me. I do not know what it is. It has no name." He reached into the neck of his shirt. He pulled out a leather thong. On it was a piece of silver. It was old, hammered thin, with the design of a dragonfly. It was worn smooth with time. "This was my mother's," he said. "She gave it to me when I became a man. She told me it would protect my heart. She said to give it only to the woman who would be its keeper." He held it out to her. Evelyn looked at it, then at him. "Cale, I cannot." "You came back for me," he said, his voice low and fierce. "You stood in the square. You faced Clay. You bled for me. You are my partner. When you wear this, you are no longer a stranger." He put the thong around her neck. The silver was cool against her skin, but it felt as heavy as an anchor. It was a promise. It was a bond. She did not know what to say. The words were all wrong. So she did what she had done in the cave. She leaned forward. This time, there was no hesitation. She kissed him. It was not the kiss of recognition. This was a kiss of acceptance. It was hungry, and it was deep. It was the taste of dust and sweat and survival. It was a voluntary, fearless claiming. He responded, his hand coming up to cup the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her hair. He pulled her closer, his strength, which she had seen as a weapon, now becoming a comfort. It was a kiss that said, "We are alive. In this one moment, we are alive." They did not make love that night. Clara was too close. Their duty was too heavy. But the promise had been made. They found a small, hidden oasis the next day, a trickle of water from a rock face, a few cottonwood trees, and a pool no bigger than a wagon. It was a miracle. "We rest here," Cale said. "One night, the horses need water. We need water." Clara seemed to rally. The water revived her. She sat up against a tree, her eyes clear for the first time in days. "So," she rasped, looking at the silver necklace on Evelyn's neck. "It is like that." Evelyn blushed. "Clara." "It is good," Clara said. "He is a good man. Better than any white man in that town. You found a good one. Girl, you hold on." That night, Evelyn and Cale washed the grime of the journey from their skin in the small pool. The moon was a sliver, but the stars were bright. They were alone. Clara was asleep on the far side of the trees. They came together in the shallow water. It was quiet. It was gentle. There was no desperation, only a profound, elemental need. His hands on her body were not rough. They were reverent. Her touch on his skin was not fearful. It was a discovery. It was two worlds, two histories, two skins, meeting under the silent, watching stars. It was a wild, gentle act of union, a defiant creation of life in a land that seemed to deal only in death. It was a harmony, a merging. They were no longer a white woman and a Navajo warrior. They were just Cale and Evelyn. The morning was bright and cold. The peace of the oasis was absolute. Cale was watering the horses. Evelyn was packing their few supplies. "Evelyn!" Clara's voice was sharp, a warning. Evelyn spun around. Clara was pointing, her hand trembling. 4 men on horseback were at the edge of the clearing. They were not cavalry. They were hard-bitten, filthy men, bounty hunters. "Well, well," the leader said, his teeth yellow. He held a rifle. "Look what we found. It is the teacher. And the savage." He grinned. "Marshal Clay is paying $500 for the engine. And he said he wants the woman unharmed." Cale moved, pulling his pistol, but he was too far from cover. The bounty hunter aimed his rifle at Cale. "Do not be a fool, boy. You are done." "No!" Evelyn screamed. She grabbed Jed's pistol, the one Cale had given her. She aimed, just as he had taught her. She breathed out. She squeezed. The shot was true. It struck the bounty hunter in the shoulder, making him drop the rifle. He howled in rage. "Kill the savage!" he screamed. "And grab the woman!" It was chaos. Gunfire echoed in the small oasis. Cale dived behind the horses, firing back. One of the men dismounted and ran, not for Cale, but for Evelyn. He saw her as the easier prize. He lunged, grabbing her, his knife flashing. "Evil!" Cale shouted. "Get off her!" It was Clara. She was on her feet. She had the heavy iron skillet from their pack, with the last ounce of her strength, the strength of a tough woman who had seen too much. She swung it with both hands. It connected with the back of the bounty hunter's head. He dropped like a stone. Evelyn scrambled free, but another man, still on his horse, saw Clara standing, defenseless. He smiled, raised his pistol, and fired. The shot hit Clara square in the chest, the same place as before. This time, there was no mistake. The force of it threw her backward. "Clara!" Evelyn screamed, running to her. Cale saw his opening. The man who had shot Clara was looking at her, laughing. Cale's next shot was perfect. It took the man in the throat. The other two, seeing their leader wounded and 2 men dead, turned and fled. Cale did not pursue. He ran to Evelyn's side. She was cradling Clara's head in her lap. The old woman was gone. Her eyes were open, staring at the blue sky she had wanted to see. She had died protecting her. Evelyn laid her head on Clara's chest and sobbed, her body shaking with a grief so profound it emptied her. Cale stood over them. His face was granite. He looked at the bodies of the bounty hunters. He looked at the trail of dust from the 2 who had fled. He looked at Evelyn, weeping for the woman who had been her only friend. He knelt, and he gently touched Evelyn's hair. His hand was shaking with rage. "No more," he whispered, his voice a low, terrible promise. "They will not hunt us. We will not run. We will finish this. I will take you to my valley. And then I will return to Dust Creek, and I will end this. I swear it on my mother's spirit." They buried Clara under the largest cottonwood tree, her face toward the east. Cale marked the grave with river stones, a silent, patient act. He placed 1 stone for every year she had protected Evelyn, for every kindness she had shown. Evelyn stood beside him, her grief a cold, hard knot in her chest. There were no tears left. There was only a void, and a new, terrible resolve. Clara's death had burned away the last of her fear. The woman from Pennsylvania was gone, buried with her friend. What stood in her place was a woman of the high desert, a woman who had seen the law become a lie, and a friend die for it. Cale's vow at the oasis had been a whisper, but it echoed in the canyon. He would not just run. He would deliver his people, and then he would return to Dust Creek. He would end Barton Clay. They rode for another 2 days, pushing the horses, their grief a silent, shared burden. They rode into the high country, where the red rock turned to pine and the air grew thin and cold. Cale was transformed. This was his land. He moved with a new confidence, a certainty that had been absent in the flat, open desert. On the 3rd day, as the sun was setting, he stopped on a high ridge. He pointed. "There," he said. Evelyn looked down. It was a valley, a deep, lush canyon that seemed impossible in this dry land. A river, fed by mountain snows, ran through its center, a ribbon of silver. Small fields of corn and squash grew near its banks. It was green. It was alive. "Blue Shadow Valley," she whispered. "It is our home," Cale said, but his voice was heavy. "It is not as it was." They rode down. As they approached, Evelyn saw what he meant. The valley was beautiful, but it was almost empty, where there had once been hundreds. Now there were only a few hogans scattered by the stream. An old man, his face a map of wrinkles, sat by a small fire. A few children, including Toma, ran out to greet them. Toma ran to Cale, his face alight with joy, and hugged his uncle's leg. "You came!" he shouted. "You came!" A woman emerged from the largest hogan. She was tall, with Cale's same proud features and dark, intelligent eyes. This was Yazi, Cale's sister, Toma's mother. She saw Cale, and her face broke into a mask of relief. She ran to him, embracing him. Then she saw Evelyn. Her face hardened. She looked at the white woman, at her torn and bloody dress, at the silver pendant around her neck. She said something to Cale in their language, her voice sharp. "She is with me, sister," Cale said, his voice firm. "Her name is Evelyn Hart. She is the teacher woman who stood for Toma. She is the one who bled to save me. She is our friend." Yazi looked at Evelyn with suspicion, but she said nothing more. She led Cale to the hogan, her hand on his arm, as if to prove to herself he was real. Evelyn felt a surge of hope. They were safe. Cale was home, but the hope died as soon as she saw the look on Cale's face. He was scanning the ridges, his eyes narrowed, his body tense. "What is it?" she asked. "The bounty hunters," he said. "The two who fled, they are not dead. They are not stupid. They would have followed us at a distance. They saw where we were going. You think they rode for Clay?
I know it, Cale said. They are not just bounty hunters. They are his men. They will be back. Not for me, for the valley. He knows where we are. He knows where to find the nest.
He was right. They had less than a day. The two men had ridden their horses to death to get back to Dust Creek, spurred by their failure and the promise of Clay's reward. Barton Clay did not hesitate. He had his excuse. The Navajo savage had escaped, aided by the white trader. He had murdered bounty hunters. He was leading an uprising. The forged map was all the proof the mining company needed. They gave him 20 more men, hard cases from the silver pits, armed with new repeating rifles. They gave him dynamite. He was not coming to arrest Cale. He was coming to cleanse the valley. Cale gathered his people. Evelyn watched, her heart sinking. It was not an army. It was a handful of families. There were 15, maybe 20 men capable of fighting. Many were old, carrying bows and old trade rifles. Toma, no more than 10, stood with them, holding a knife. He comes with rifles, Cale told them. He comes with many men. They come to take our land, to drive us out. This is where Ashki died. This is where our mothers are buried. We will not run. A low, resonant sound began. The old man by the fire was beating a small drum, a war song. It was a sound of defiance, a sound that said, "We are still here." Cale came to Evelyn. He was wearing his brother's war paint, 2 black lines across his cheeks. He looked like a stranger, like a spirit of vengeance. "Evelyn," he said, his voice low, "you must go. Take Yazai and the children. Take Toma. There are caves high in the cliffs. You can hide there until it is over." Evelyn looked at him. She looked at the small, brave band of fighters. She looked at the women and children, their faces stoic, their eyes wide with fear. She touched the silver pendant at her neck. "No," she said. "This is not your fight," he argued, his voice harsh with fear for her. "I will not have your death on my hands." "You told me I saw you as a man," she said, her voice quiet but shaking with a force he had never heard. "Do you not see me as a woman? Not just a person to be hidden. Your sister stays, your people stay, I stay." She pointed to the largest hogan. "I am a teacher, but I am also a nurse. I tended to Clara. I tended to you. I will tend to your people. That is my fight." He looked at her for a long, hard moment. He saw the woman from Pennsylvania. He saw the woman who had faced him in the stable, the woman who had kissed him in the rain, the woman who had held his dying friend. She was not leaving. He nodded, a single, sharp acknowledgement. He had no more time to argue. Yazi, who had been watching, came to Evelyn's side. She held out a bundle of clean rags and a skin of water. "Then you will need this, teacher woman," she said. The suspicion was gone. In its place was a grim, shared purpose. The battle began just after noon. Clay's men did not try stealth. They rode into the mouth of the valley, fanned out in a line, and opened fire. The sound of the repeating rifles was a deafening, rolling thunder. Bullets tore through the corn stalks, thudded into the adobe walls of the hogans. Cale's men were hidden in the rocks, on the slopes. They returned fire with their old rifles, with arrows that hissed through the air. The drum beat faster. Smoke, acrid and white, filled the valley floor. Evelyn and Yazai worked in the central hogan, which had become a makeshift clinic. The first wounded man was carried in, an old man with a bullet in his leg. Evelyn, her hands steady, did what she had seen the doctor in Pennsylvania do. She cleaned the wound. She bound it. She moved to the next. She was no longer afraid. There was no room for fear. There was only the work. The fighting was desperate. Cale's fighters were good. They were fighting for their homes, and they used the land as a weapon. They caused casualties. But Clay's men had numbers and superior firepower. They advanced slowly, relentlessly, driving the Navajo back, from the rocks to the stream. The battle funneled toward the center of the valley, near the banks of the river. Cale was everywhere, firing his pistol, shouting encouragement, a phantom in the smoke. He saw Barton Clay, dismounted, standing near the water. Clay's arm was in a sling from Clara's shotgun blast, but he was grinning, directing his men, his face a mask of triumph. Cale knew this had to end. The only way to stop the attack was to cut off the head. He broke from cover. He ran into the open, toward the stream. "Clay!" he roared, his voice carrying over the gunfire. "Barton Clay!" The fighting lulled. The miners paused, watching. Clay turned, his smile widening. "You should have stayed dead, savage," Clay called out. "This is my land," Cale shouted, throwing Jed's pistol into the water. "You are not welcome here. This is between you and me." Clay laughed. "Between you and me." He unholstered his own heavy Colt revolver and tossed it to Jed. "I do not need a gun to kill you, boy." He drew a large Bowie knife. "This is a pleasure I have saved for myself." He advanced. The two men met on the banks of the stream. It was not a duel. It was a brawl, fueled by pure hatred. Clay was bigger, heavier, his strength born of brawling in saloons. Cale was faster, his rage giving him a desperate, wiry strength. They traded blows. Cale landed 2 sharp hits to Clay's ribs. Clay answered with a heavy fist that caught Cale in the face, sending him reeling. They clinched, wrestling, their boots churning the mud. They fell, rolling into the shallow, rushing water. Clay's weight gave him the advantage. He ended up on top, his one good hand, his left, finding Cale's throat. He pushed Cale's head under the cold mountain water, holding him down. Cale struggled, his hands clawing at Clay's arm, but the marshal's grip was iron. Evelyn saw it from the Hogan. She saw Cale's struggle. She ran out, Clara's small derringer clutched in her hand. The miners were all watching the fight, screaming for Clay, cheering as the bubbles from Cale's mouth stopped. No one noticed her. Clay looked up, his face purple with the strain. He saw Evelyn. He saw her, not 10 yards away, helpless. He smiled, a gurgling, triumphant sound. "I told you, teacher," he spat, his voice a wet rasp. "I told you I would have it all." He was drowning Cale, and she was next. Cale was fading. The world was black and red. He felt Clay shift his weight, saw him look at Evelyn. That one moment, that one instant of distraction, was all he needed. With the last of his strength, his hand, which had been trapped beneath him, found the knife he still carried in his boot. He drove it up, deep into Clay's side, below the ribs. Clay roared. It was not a sound of pain, it was a sound of pure animal shock. His grip on Cale's throat loosened. He looked down at the handle of the knife buried in his gut. Cale used both feet and shoved. Clay stumbled backward. The bank was a short, sharp drop, a 20-foot fall to a deeper part of the ravine where the water churned over jagged black rocks. Clay teetered on the edge, his eyes wide, his mouth open. He did not scream. He just fell. He fell backward, his arms windmilling, and landed on the rocks below with a final, sickening crack. He did not move. Silence. A profound, echoing silence, broken only by the sound of the river and Cale's desperate gasps as he dragged himself from the water. The miners stared. Their leader gone, Jed, the bounty hunter, stared. Cale pulled himself to the bank. He was victorious. He was alive. He looked for Evelyn. He saw her, the useless derringer in her hand, her face a mask of terror and relief. He smiled. A shot rang out. It was Jed. He had his rifle. He had been watching, waiting. The bullet struck Cale high in the chest, spinning him around. Cale looked down at the new, dark stain spreading across his shirt. He looked at Evelyn. The smile was gone. He collapsed, falling forward, his hand outstretched, his face half in the mud. "Cale,"
Evelyn's scream was not human. It was the sound of a soul being torn. She ran. She did not care about the guns, about the miners. She ran from her cover, across the open, muddy ground. Bullets kicked up the dirt around her feet, but she did not stop. She reached him. He was breathing. Barely. A bloody froth was on his lips. She ripped her skirt, tearing a long strip of cloth, and pressed it hard against the wound. "No," she whispered. "No, you cannot leave me." Jed and the remaining miners advanced. Their leader was dead, but the woman was here, and the savage was down. This was it. It was over. Evelyn looked up, shielding Cale's body with her own. Her eyes were dry, burning with a hatred that matched Clay's. She would die here. They would die together. A low rumble filled the valley. It was not thunder. It was hoofbeats. Not from the south. From the north. A wave of riders, painted for war, poured over the northern ridge. It was not the army. It was more Navajo, allied clans from the high mesas, drawn by the signal fire Cale must have set, a fire she had not even known about. They crashed into the miners' flank like a hammer. The fight was not a fight. It was a rout. The miners, caught between the warriors and the river, broke. Jed turned and ran. The Navajo warriors, led by a grim-faced old man, gave chase. The valley was saved. As the last of the hoofbeats faded, the sky, which had been a dark, bruised gray, opened up. A cold, cleansing rain began to fall. It fell on the living and the dead. It washed the blood from the rocks, the powder smoke from the air. It put out the small fires that had started in the dry grass. It was a baptism for the valley. The battle was over. The Navajo had won, but the cost was terrible. Yazi was wailing over the body of the old drummer. Toma was staring, his face white, at a dead miner. And Evelyn was still kneeling in the mud, her hands pressed to Cale's chest, the rain mixing with her tears, whispering his name over and over, as the land, finally, was quiet. The warriors from the high mesas carried him to Yazi's hogan. They laid him on the sheepskins, a broken offering. Evelyn did not wait for an invitation. She followed, her mind cold and sharp, pushing past Yazi, past the old medicine man who had come to chant. "I need boiled water," she commanded, her voice the voice of the teacher, the voice of authority. "I need every clean rag you have, now." Yazi, her own face stained with tears for her friends, looked at this wild, mud-caked white woman. She saw the look in Evelyn's eyes. It was not hysteria. It was a terrible, precise focus. She gave the orders. The bullet had gone through. It had entered his chest and exited his back, just missing his spine. It was a miracle, but it had torn his lung. He was drowning in his own blood. For hours, Evelyn fought, the medicine man chanted, waving feathers of smoke to ward off the dark spirits. Evelyn worked with her hands, pressing pads of clean cloth, turning Cale onto his side to let the blood drain, forcing sips of a bitter herb tea that Yazi brewed, a tea to stop the bleeding. She did not know what she was doing. She was acting on pure, desperate instinct. She was fighting death itself, bartering with it. She had lost her husband. She had lost Clara. She would not lose this man. For 3 days, he did not move. He was lost in a coma, a gray, still place between life and death. His breathing was a shallow, wet rasp. Evelyn did not sleep. She sat by his side, her hand on his chest, as if she could force her own life, her own will into him through her touch. Yazi brought her food, broth and corn, and Evelyn ate without tasting, her eyes never leaving his face. On the 4th day, his fever spiked. He was burning. The medicine man said the spirits were fighting for his soul. Evelyn said the wound was infected. They fought, silently, for his life. The old man packed the wounds with a green mud. Evelyn bathed his body with cool water, hour after hour. The valley mourned. They buried their dead. The miners' bodies were left for the vultures. The valley had been saved.
but the cost was etched on every face. Yazi had lost her kinsman. Toma had seen his uncle fall. And Evelyn was a ghost, haunting the bedside of a man who might never wake. Weeks passed. The raw wound of the battle began to scar over. The valley began to live again. Cale's fever broke. He was no longer burning, but he did not wake. He was just absent, a living, breathing shell. Evelyn's grief was a constant, dull ache. But her mind, the mind of a teacher, could not be still. She saw the children. She saw Toma. He was a small, silent shadow, his eyes too old. He sat outside Cale's hogan, waiting. One morning, she could not sit in the dark hogan any longer. She took a piece of charcoal from the fire. She found a flat, smooth piece of slate by the river. She went to Toma. She sat on the ground in front of him, under the shade of a large cottonwood. She drew a picture of a horse. She wrote the word, H-O-R-S-E. Horse, she said, her voice hoarse from disuse. Toma looked at her. She pointed to Cale's pinto, grazing by the stream. Horse. He said nothing. She drew a man, a yen. She pointed to the old man, the drummer, who was mending a trap. Man. She pointed to herself. Woman. W-O-M-A-N. Toma watched her. He picked up a stick. He drew in the dirt. He drew a picture of her, her hair flying, her face streaked with mud, a gun in her hand. He looked at her. Teacher woman, he said. Then he shook his head. He said a word in Navajo. Ilhosh yitahi. He said it again, trying the English. Wild, wild teacher. A small smile touched Evelyn's lips. It was the first in a month. Yes, she whispered. Wild teacher. The next day, 2 more children came. The day after, 5. She held her class under the cottonwood tree. She taught them their letters. She taught them to write their names. And they taught her. They taught her the word for river, for stone, for sky. They taught her the word for hozo, the word for peace, for balance. She was teaching them to read a book. They were teaching her to read the world. She was drawing a map of the United States in the dirt one afternoon. A week later, when the sentry's call echoed down the valley. Riders. The valley froze. The women grabbed the children, the few remaining fighters. Cale's allied clansmen among them grabbed their rifles. They had won the battle, but they knew the war was not over. Evelyn ran to the hogan. Cale was, as she had left him, unconscious. She grabbed the pistol she now kept at her belt. She would not let them take him. She would not let them take her. A column of blue coats rode into the valley. Cavalry. At their head was not a soldier, but a man in a black suit, riding a fine black horse. He was an older man, with a stern, clean-shaven face and eyes that missed nothing. He rode to the center of the village and dismounted. The old man, the drummer, stepped forward. "We are here in peace," the man in the suit said, his voice carrying. "I am Federal Judge Silas Wright. From Santa Fe, I am looking for a woman named Evelyn Hart." Evelyn stepped out of the hogan, her pistol still in her hand. The soldiers tensed. "I am Evelyn Hart," she said. Judge Wright's eyes widened. He looked at her buckskin dress, a gift from Yazi. He looked at her hair, braided with a strip of red cloth. He looked at the gun. This was not the frightened teacher from his imagination. "Miss Hart," he said, stepping toward her. "I received your letter. Clara's driver. He rode as you asked." "You are too late," Evelyn said, her voice flat. "Clara is dead." "I know," the judge said, his voice softening. "We found her body, and Marshal Clay's, and a dozen others." He held up his hand as the Navajo warriors gripped their rifles. "We are not here to arrest anyone. We are here to deliver the law. Marshal Barton Clay has been found guilty, posthumously, of conspiracy, murder, and high crimes against the territory. The Apex Mining Survey and its contract are declared null and void. The men who rode with him, those who survived, are fugitives. This valley, he said, his voice rising, the Blue Shadow Valley, is hereby declared a protected ward of the United States government by the Treaty of 1868. It is inviolate. It is Navajo land. You are safe. The valley was silent. Yazai stepped forward. "And the cost?" she asked, her voice shaking. "My kinsmen are dead. My brother, he lies broken. Your law comes on a slow horse, Judge." Judge Wright had the grace to look ashamed. "It does, madam. It does." He turned to Evelyn. "Miss Hart, may I have a word?" She walked with him to the river, the same river where Cale had fallen. "You are a very difficult woman to find," he said. "I was not hiding," she said. "No, I suppose not." He reached into his coat. He handed her a folded, official document. "This is from the territorial governor. It is a full pardon. For your escape. For aiding a fugitive. Given the circumstances and Marshal Clay's profound corruption, you are a free woman. You are exonerated." Evelyn looked at the paper. A pardon. She was free. She could go home. The word home felt like ash in her mouth. "There is, however, a condition," the judge said, looking away from her, toward the water. "A condition. Your presence here, it is considered inflammatory. The Apex Company has powerful friends. They are calling you a traitor, an instigator. They are blaming you for the miners' deaths. The governor, he feels it would be safer for all involved if you were to leave New Mexico territory. Immediately." Evelyn stared at him. "Safer for who? Judge, for me or for the governor?" "It is a request, Miss Hart. A strong one. We have a wagon. It will escort you to Santa Fe. From there, we have a paid ticket for the stagecoach, all the way back to Pennsylvania." She looked at the pardon in her hand. Her freedom. It was a piece of paper that ordered her to leave. She looked at the hogan where Cale lay. "He saved my life," she said, her voice a whisper. "More than once. He is in there. He has not woken since the battle. He may never wake." "I am sorry for that, Miss Hart," the judge said, his voice kind. "Truly, he is a brave man, but you are a civilized woman. You do not belong here. This is a hard, savage land. Go home. Forget this. Live your life." He left her to think. The wagon would leave at dawn. She sat in the hogan all night. The valley was celebrating. They were free. They were safe. There were drums. But this time, they were drums of joy. Evelyn sat in the dark. Catriel's breathing was steady, but he was gone. She touched his face. "Cale," she whispered. "I am free. They say I can go home." She laid her head on his chest. "But this is my home, Pennsylvania. That is the ghost. This is real. You are real. This land is real." She cried, silent, heartbroken tears. "But you are not here, and I am so tired. I am so alone." She made her decision. She could not stay. Watching him fade, it was too much. She would go. She would take the freedom she had been offered. She would leave this place of pain and memory. She stood. She gathered her only possession, the forged map. She would give it to the judge. She leaned down to kiss Cale one last time. She pressed her lips to his forehead, his skin cool, his breath a faint whisper. "Goodbye," she whispered. She turned to leave. A hand grabbed her wrist. It was weak, the grip barely there, but it was real. She froze. She turned back. Cale's eyes were open. They were open, and they were looking at her. They were cloudy, pained, but they were his. She fell to her knees, her breath knocked out of her. "Cale!" she sobbed, grabbing his hand. He looked at her. He saw the tears. He saw her, packed, ready to leave. He licked his dry, cracked lips. He tried to speak. It was a croak.
She gave him water. He drank. He tried again. His voice was a bare thread, a sound like dry leaves skittering on rock, but she heard him. "If you go," he whispered, his eyes holding hers, "this land, it loses its soul again." Evelyn Hart's heart broke and healed, all in one instant. She was not a prisoner of the law or of love. She was a free woman, and she was free to choose. She put his hand to her cheek. "Then I will stay," she said. "I will stay." When the judge came to her in the morning, the wagon ready, she was outside, washing rags. "I am not going, Judge," she said. "Miss Hart," he argued, "be reasonable. You are pardoned. You are free." "I am, Judge," she said, looking at him, her eyes clear and calm. "And I am choosing to stay. This is my home. These are my people." Judge Wright argued for 10 minutes. He threatened. He cajoled. She just shook her head. Finally, he sighed, "You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met." "You should have met my friend Clara," Evelyn said. "He left. The soldiers rode out of the valley." Evelyn watched them go. She turned and went back to Cale. "He was weak, but he was alive. He would heal. The valley would heal." A week later, Cale was sitting up, propped against the Hogan wall. Evelyn was holding her class. She was telling Toma that she would not be leaving. She was going to build a real school. "A school," Cale said. "Yes," she said. "A real one, made of adobe. A place for all the children. A place for books and for stories. A place for both our worlds." He looked at her, at the fire in her eyes. "Adobe is hard work," he said. "I am not afraid of hard work," she said. They started the next day. The whole valley helped. The men, led by Cale, who was still weak but insisted on helping, cut the forms. The women, led by Yazi, brought the water. And Evelyn, she was the one who mixed the mud. She was knee-deep in the wet, clay soil, mixing it with straw, her skirts hitched up, her face and arms covered in mud. It was heavy, back-breaking work. Cale came and stood beside her. He was supposed to be resting. "You are doing it wrong," he said, a small smile playing on his lips. "Then show me, warrior," she said, tossing her muddy hair out of her eyes. He stepped into the pit with her. He showed her how to use her feet, how to feel the mud, to know when it was ready. They worked, side by side, their bodies moving in a shared, ancient rhythm. He reached down for a handful of mud to test it. His hand, scarred and strong, covered hers in the dark, wet earth. Their fingers interlaced. It was not a kiss. It was not a passionate embrace. It was something more. It was a joining. Their hands, caked in the soil of his valley, became one. He looked at her, his eyes clear and full of a love that was as deep and as real as the land itself. She looked back, her face smudged with dirt, and she smiled. They stood there for a long moment, hands joined in the mud, the sun warm on their backs, the sound of the children laughing as they made their own small adobe bricks, the wild teacher and the Navajo warrior, building a future from the mud of the valley floor. Far above them, on the highest rim of the canyon, a lone rider watched. He sat on a magnificent silver horse, a horse that seemed to drink the sunlight. He was too far away to be seen, a tiny speck against the blue. He watched the woman and the Navajo man. He watched them for a very long time, his body still as stone. Then he raised a brass spyglass, and the sun glinted off the lens as he brought them into sharp, clear focus. He watched, and he waited. The rider on the silver horse was gone. For 2 weeks, the valley breathed. Peace settled over the land like a warm blanket. The schoolhouse was finished, a solid, square building of fresh adobe and pine. The walls were thick, cool in the heat of the day. Cale's wound, the one that had almost taken him, healed. It left a puckered, angry scar high on his chest, a mirror to the exit wound on his back. He moved with the old, fluid grace,
the shadow of pain gone from his eyes. He and Evelyn were the center of the valley. Their partnership, forged in blood and flight, had become the foundation of its new life. Then the visitor arrived. He rode the silver horse down the main path, not from the high rim, but from the south, the direction of Dust Creek. He was not a miner, nor a soldier. He was dressed in a fine black suit, his boots polished, his hair the color of pale corn silk. He was handsome, with sharp, intelligent blue eyes. He stopped his magnificent horse in front of the new school, where Evelyn was sweeping the threshold. "An impressive structure," he called out. His voice was smooth, educated, with the sound of the East in it. He dismounted, sweeping his dark hat from his head. "I am searching for a Miss Evelyn Hart." Evelyn's heart did a strange, small flip. He looked like the men she had known in Pennsylvania. Cale, who was reinforcing the small horse corral, stopped his work. He watched, his face unreadable. "I am Evelyn Hart," she said, setting the broom aside. "My name," the man said, bowing slightly, "is Emerson Clay." The name fell into the quiet valley like a stone. Cale's hand went to the knife at his belt. He began to walk toward them, his movement slow, deliberate, a panther closing distance. Emerson saw him. He raised a placating hand, his gaze fixed on Evelyn. "Please, I understand the shock of my name. Barton Clay was my brother." "Then you are not welcome here," Cale said, his voice a low growl. He stopped 10 feet away. "Please," Emerson said, his blue eyes full of a civilized sadness. "I beg you, hear me. My brother, he was a hard man, a violent man. He was a shame on our family. I am not him. I am a merchant from Santa Fe." He turned his full attention to Evelyn, recognizing her as the one he must convince. "I came to Dust Creek to retrieve my brother's remains. I found a town poisoned by his greed. I found the report from Judge Wright. I learned what Barton did, what he tried to do to you, Miss Hart, what he did to your friend, Clara." Evelyn was stunned into silence. This was not the confrontation she had ever imagined. "My brother was a criminal," Emerson continued, his voice earnest. "He died by the knife, as he lived. That is justice. But his sins have left a stain on my name. I am here to make amends." He gestured to the schoolhouse. "I heard what you were building. I want to help. I have a wagon, not 2 miles from here. It is loaded with desks, slates, books from the East. I want to fund your work. Please, allow me to clear my family's name by doing this one good thing for the children." Cale stepped forward. "We do not need your books. We do not need your blood money." "Cale," Evelyn said softly. She looked at Emerson. He was not Barton. Barton was a brute, a creature of dust and whiskey. This man was refined. He spoke of atonement. He spoke her language. "Mr. Clay," she said. "That is a very generous offer." "It is the very least I can do," Emerson said, his eyes shining with sincerity. "Please, allow me." Evelyn looked at Cale, pleading. He was locked in the past, in the violence. She was looking at the future, at the children. "We accept," she said to Emerson. "We accept, and we thank you." Emerson smiled, a sad, grateful smile. "Thank you, Miss Hart." Cale said nothing. He turned his back on them both and walked away, back to the corral, the set of his shoulders a rigid line of disapproval. For a week, Emerson Clay was a guest in the valley. His wagon arrived, and it was as he had promised. It was a treasure trove. New primers, chalk, slates for every child, 3 heavy, carved desks for the older students, and a crate of books, real books. Shakespeare, Emerson, the poets she had left behind. Evelyn was overjoyed. She had been starved for this, for a mind that understood her own. Emerson was charming. He praised her courage. He listened to her ideas. He treated the Navajo with a polite,
if distant, respect. He helped with the roof of the school, his sleeves rolled up, proving he was not afraid of work. Toma and the children followed him, fascinated by his stories of St. Louis, of riverboats, of cities with buildings 5 stories high. "You are too hard on him," Evelyn said to Cale one night as they lay in their hogan, the scent of pine in the cool air. "He is trying. He is a good man." "There is no such thing as a good Clay," Cale said from the darkness. "You see his fine clothes. You hear his soft words. I see his eyes. They are his brother's eyes, but colder. Barton was a fire. He burned hot. This one, he is like the ice in the high crevices. He waits. A man who waits like that is more dangerous than a man who shouts." "You are wrong," she said, turning away from him. "You are letting your hate blind you. I am not." The school was finished. It was perfect. Emerson announced he would be leaving the next day. He proposed a celebration, a small feast to dedicate the new building. He had brought wine in his wagon. He offered a toast. "To the wild teacher," he said, raising his cup to Evelyn, his blue eyes sparkling in the firelight. "A woman who proves that civilization can bloom in the most savage of places, to new beginnings." The valley, except for Cale, celebrated with him. The wine was sweet and strong. Later that night, the moon was high. The valley was asleep, a peaceful, trusting sleep. Evelyn was in the new schoolhouse, unable to leave. She was running her hands over the new desks, placing the books on the shelves. Cale had taken the first watch, a habit he had not broken. He was on the ridge above the valley, a silent guardian. The door of the schoolhouse opened. It was Emerson. He was not smiling. "Mr. Clay," Evelyn said, surprised. "I thought you were resting for your journey." "I am," he said. He stepped inside and closed the door. He was carrying a lantern. "I just had one last thing to do." "Is something wrong?" she asked, a sudden, cold premonition touching her heart. "My brother Barton," Emerson said, his voice flat, all the warmth gone, "was a fool. He was a loud, clumsy animal. He wanted this land for silver. He wanted you for his bed. He had no finesse." Evelyn backed away. "Emerson, what are you talking about?" "I am talking about family, Miss Hart," he said. He set the lantern on the floor. "I am talking about blood. He was my brother, my blood. And you." His voice dropped to a sneer. "You, a white woman, stood by and let a savage murder him. You helped him. You slept with him. You shamed your race. You shamed my name." The mask was gone. The educated man was gone. Beneath it was a cold, pure hatred that chilled her to the bone. Cale was right. "You," she whispered. "Barton was loud," he said, advancing on her. "I am quiet. He wanted to break you for pleasure. I want to break you for honor. I want him." He pointed out the window, toward the ridge where Cale was. "To watch. He will watch his valley burn. He will watch his people's future turn to ash. And then he will watch me take you." "No!" Evelyn screamed, lunging for the door. He hit her. It was not Barton's angry, open-handed slap. It was a cold, precise punch to the jaw. She fell, her head striking the leg of a new desk. The world exploded in white light, and then went dark. From the ridge, Cale saw the light, not the steady glow of a lantern, a sudden, angry bloom of orange. The schoolhouse. He saw the door open. He saw Emerson emerge, carrying Evelyn's limp body. He slung her over the silver horse. Cale let out a sound. It was not a word. It was a roar of pure, primal loss. Emerson mounted the horse. He looked up toward the ridge. He knew Cale was there. He had planned it. He raised his hand in a mocking salute. Then he kicked the silver horse and galloped south. Cale did not wait. He vaulted onto his pinto. He raised his head and gave the alarm call, a high, piercing cry that echoed down the canyon. "Toma, Yazi, the warriors!"
They knew that sound. It was not a warning. It was war. Cale, Toma, and 10 warriors streamed from the valley. They did not need to find a trail. They knew where he was going, not to Dust Creek. He was heading for the eastern Badlands, a maze of stone pillars and box canyons where he could lose them and finish his terrible work. They rode all night, a desperate, thundering pursuit. Emerson's horse was a legend, but it was carrying 2. Cale's pinto was a creature of the wind, its hooves barely seeming to touch the ground. Cale rode with a cold, terrifying certainty. He did not feel the wind. He did not feel the horse. He felt only the tearing void where Evelyn had been. Toma rode at his flank, his young face set in the grim lines of a warrior, his knife in his hand. At dawn, they found him. He had made a mistake. He had ridden into a box canyon, a dead end. The walls were sheer red rock, 1,000 feet high. He reined in his silver horse, its sides heaving, its silver coat dark with sweat. Cale and his riders fanned out, blocking the only entrance. "It is over! Clay!" Cale called out. His voice was dead. He had his rifle, and it was aimed at Emerson's heart. "Is it?" Emerson's voice was light, amused. He laughed. He reached down and hauled Evelyn up. She was conscious, dazed, her hands tied. He pulled her in front of him, a human shield. He pressed his pistol to her temple. "You shoot me, savage," Emerson sneered. "And she dies with me. My brother died on the rocks. Now you get to watch your woman die in the sand. A fair trade, a very fair trade." Cale's hand tightened on the rifle. He could not shoot. He was trapped. He saw Evelyn's eyes, wide with terror, but also with defiance. "Put her down, Clay," Cale said, his voice shaking with a rage he could not unleash. "First, the weapons," Emerson commanded. "All of you, drop them, or I will paint these rocks with her brains." Cale looked at Toma. He looked at his warriors. Slowly, agonizingly, he lowered his rifle and set it on the ground. The others did the same. "Good. Now the pistols," Emerson sneered. Cale unbuckled his gun belt. It was the one he had taken from Barton Clay, the one with the heavy, bone-handled Colt. He had carried it as a symbol of his victory. Now it was the symbol of his defeat. He let it fall to the sand. "Excellent," Emerson smiled. He was enjoying this, the slow, perfect revenge. "Now, you will watch. You will all watch." He tightened his grip on Evelyn, his gun pressing hard into her temple. Evelyn looked at Cale. She saw his agony. She saw the guns in the dirt. She saw the burning schoolhouse in her mind. She thought of Clara, dying to save her. She was not a shield. She was not a prize. She was not a victim. She acted. She did not scream. She did not plead. She stomped her heel, hard, onto Emerson's polished boot. At the same instant, she jammed her right elbow backward, striking him perfectly in the solar plexus. Emerson let out a sharp, surprised grunt. His breath was gone. His grip on her loosened for a fraction of a second. His gun hand wavered. It was all she needed. She did not try to escape. She fought. She grabbed his gun hand with both of her own and, with the desperation of a cornered wolf, she bit him. She sank her teeth into his wrist. Emerson roared, a sound of pure pain and shock. He instinctively let go of her waist to grab his wounded hand. Evelyn shoved herself away from him, breaking free. She did not just fall. She lunged, rolling as she hit the sand, scrambling not away, but toward the gun belt in the dirt. "You witch!" Emerson screamed, his face a mask of hate. He saw where she was going. He leveled his pistol at her, a rolling, scrambling target. He never fired. Cale had moved the instant she did. He did not go for his rifle. He had a knife in his boot. He threw it. The blade, a piece of sharpened steel, flew across the 20 feet that separated them and sank deep into Emerson's right shoulder. Emerson screamed, his gun hand spasming, the pistol flying from his grip and clattering on the rocks.
At the same moment, Evelyn reached the gun belt. She ripped the heavy Colt from its holster, Barton Clay's gun. Emerson, clutching his bleeding shoulder, his other hand shattered, saw her. He saw the gun. The cold, civilized mask was gone. His face was a mask of pure, animal terror. He kicked the silver horse, trying to turn it, to flee. Evelyn rose to one knee. She held the heavy revolver with both hands, just as Cale had taught her. She aimed at the man who had burned her school, the man who had mocked her love, the man who was the last shadow of the hate that had taken Clara. She breathed out. She squeezed the trigger. The shot was deafening. It echoed off the canyon walls like a cannon. Emerson Clay was thrown backward from the saddle, a dark, smoking hole in the center of his fine black suit. He hit the sand and did not move. The silver horse, finally free, bolted down the canyon, past the silent Navajo riders, and disappeared into the rising sun. Silence. Kem. Elle walked toward her. He stopped, standing over her. She was still on one knee, the heavy gun smoking in her hands. She was shaking, the reaction taking her. He knelt in front of her. He did not take the gun. He just put his hands on her shoulders, steadying her. Toma and the other warriors gathered around, their faces grim, silent witnesses to the end. Evelyn looked at the body, the man who had brought books and smiles, the man who had died for a vengeance that belonged to a dead man. "It is over," she whispered. "It is finally over." "Yes," Cale said. "They did not leave him. He was a white man. He was Barton's brother. They buried him there, in the sand of the Box Canyon." Cale and Toma dug the grave. Evelyn wrapped his body in his own fine coat. There was no hatred left. There was no victory. There was only a profound, weary sadness. As they finished, a few drops of rain began to fall, a small, passing shower, as if the sky itself were weeping, washing the blood from the sand. Cale looked at her. He touched the bruise on her jaw. "The past is buried," he said. "Evelyn." He let out a long, shuddering breath. She looked at the fresh grave, then at Cale, her partner, her heart. She felt the rain on her face like a cleansing. "No one owes anyone," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "Barton is gone. Emerson is gone. Clara is avenged." She looked at the heavy Colt in her hand, then dropped it onto the sand by the grave. "We only have the future." Kamel took her hand, his grip warm and strong. "Let us go home," he said. They mounted their horses, Cale, Evelyn, and Toma. They rode out of the canyon, leaving the dead to the silence of the desert, and rode west, toward the smoking ruin of their school, toward a future they would have to build, once again, from the ashes. They rode back into the valley under a sky gray with smoke. The school was not just burned. It was a ruin of charred beams and blackened adobe. The desks Emerson had brought, the books, the slates, were all gone. A pile of ash. It was a scar. A final, cruel wound left by the Clay family. Evelyn stood before it, the cold morning rain from the canyon still damp in her hair. She looked at the ashes of her books, the Shakespeare, the poetry. It was the last link to her old life, and it was gone. Cale stood beside her, his hand resting on her back. He said nothing. He simply waited. Toma and the warriors who had ridden with them were silent, their faces hard. Yaze ran to them, her face a mask of relief when she saw them alive. She saw the smoking ruin, and her eyes filled with a fresh anger. "He took our future," she said, her voice shaking. "That man, he took the children's future." "No," Evelyn said, her voice quiet, but clear. She turned from the ashes to face Yazi. She looked at Toma. She looked at the small, frightened group of children who had gathered. "He took a building. He did not take the future. He did not take our knowledge." She walked away from the ruin, to the big cottonwood tree where she had first taught Toma. She picked up a piece of charcoal from the dead fire.
She looked at the children.
"We do not need walls to learn," she said. "We do not need desks."
She drew a large A on the smooth bark of the tree.
"Class is not over. It is just beginning."
Time passed. The raw, violent wound of their past began to heal. The seasons turned. The harsh, dry heat of summer gave way to the crisp, golden light of autumn. The valley, once a place of fear, became a place of work. They rebuilt the school. Cale led the men. They did not use pine from the lowlands. They went high into the mountains, to the places where the wind was born, and they cut the strong, old trees. They hauled them down, and the sound of axes echoed in the canyon. It was the sound of rebuilding.
Evelyn, Yazay, and the women mixed the adobe. They laughed as they worked, their hands and feet covered in the same mud that had joined Evelyn and Cale. They made the bricks, hundreds of them, and laid them in the sun to cure. They were not just building a school. They were building a fortress, a statement, a promise.
The new school rose from the ashes of the old one. It was larger. The walls were 3 feet thick. It had a real stone foundation. It had 2 rooms. Cale, a skilled carver, fashioned new desks from the mountain pine. They were simple, strong, and beautiful. The valley itself revived, with Clay and the mining company gone. The land breathed. The river ran clean. The corn crop that autumn was the most plentiful in a decade. The hunting was good. The people, who had lived for a generation under the shadow of the white man's greed, were free. They were safe. The valley became a new thing. It was a place where 2 worlds met, not in conflict, but in a slow, careful harmony. Evelyn held her classes in the finished school. She taught the Navajo children, and the few children of mixed blood from the allied clans, to read and write English. She taught them arithmetic. She read to them from the one book she had left, a small, worn Bible she had carried from Pennsylvania. And Cale, his body fully healed, his spirit at peace, taught in the same room. He taught the children the old ways. He taught them the stories of their people. He taught them how to read the tracks of a deer, how to listen to the wind, how to find water in a dry land. He taught them the ethics of the tribe to take only what you need, to honor the earth that feeds you, to respect the elders who guide you. Trademark S School was a place of 2 knowledges, 2 languages, 2 futures woven into one. News of the valley spread. The allied clans who had come to Cale's aid told stories. The soldiers who had come with Judge Wright told stories. They told of the corrupt marshal, Barton Clay. They told of the battle. And they told of the woman, the white teacher who had fought with the Navajo, who had killed the man who burned her school, and who had chosen to stay. Travelers, prospectors, and merchants, brave enough to take the northern route, began to stop in the valley. They expected a savage, dangerous place. They found a lush, peaceful oasis. They found fields of corn. They found a stone and adobe schoolhouse. They found Navajo children reading from slates, and a white woman, her hair braided like a Navajo, working in a garden beside the warrior who was her partner. They left with fresh water, with corn, and with a story that grew with every telling. They stopped calling it Blue Shadow Valley. They began to call it, in their rough, wondering voices, the Wild Teacher's Valley. Evelyn Hart, the stranger, the widow from the east, had become a living legend. The territorial government in Santa Fe, hearing these reports and hearing of the profound peace in the region, acted. Judge Wright, a man of conscience, made a second journey. This time, he came not with an escort of soldiers, but with a wagon of supplies. He brought blankets, seed, tools, and 2 fine new rifles. He presented them to Cale as a gift from the government, a sign of our gratitude, the judge said, for ending the reign of corruption in Dust Creek and for keeping the peace. He met with Evelyn in the new schoolhouse. He looked at the children, their bright, curious faces. "It seems you were right, Miss Hart," he said, a small, wry smile on his face. "This is where you belong." "I'm glad you agree, Judge," she said, smiling back. "The governor sends this," He said. He handed her a formal document. It was not a pardon. It was an official charter for the Blue Valley Harmonized School, and a stipend of $20 a month for her work as its teacher. You are not just a resident, Miss Hart. You are now a recognized employee of the territory, a symbol of harmony. Evelyn laughed softly. Evelyn laughed. A symbol? I was an outlaw, a traitor, and now I am a symbol. The West changes quickly, the judge said. Toma was the one who changed the most. He was Cale's shadow, and he was Evelyn's. He was the first to learn English, and the first to learn to write it. He was brilliant, his mind a bridge between the two worlds. He devoured Evelyn's books, but he also sat with the old drummer, learning the ancient songs and stories. He was not just Navajo. He was not white. He was new. He began to travel with Judge Wright as his translator, the first official interpreter for the region. He was Cale's pride, and he was Evelyn's. One evening, as winter was beginning to whisper from the high peaks, Evelyn was sick. She felt a weariness she had not felt since the fever in the desert. She was standing by the river, and a wave of nausea swept over her. Yazai found her, sitting on the bank, her face pale. Yazai, who had become her truest friend, her sister, looked at her. A slow, knowing smile spread across her face. She did not ask. She placed a gentle hand on Evelyn's belly. The valley is truly blessed, Yazai said, her voice soft. After so much death, the land gives new life. Evelyn stared at her, her heart stopping. Yazai, You carry a child, Yazai said, her eyes shining. A child of two worlds, a child of the warrior and the teacher. Evelyn's hand flew to her own stomach. A child, a baby, a small, impossible spark of life. Cale's child, a surge of joy so profound, so fierce. It took her breath away. It was the future, it was the promise, it was the reason. When she told Cale that night, he did not cheer, he did not shout. He was a man of the quiet earth. He simply came to her and put his arms around her. He held her, his face buried in her hair, and his strong body trembled. He held her for a long time, and she felt the hot, wet sting of his tears on her neck. He was weeping for the brother he had lost, for the people who were gone, and for the new life that had been given back to him. The tribe held a celebration. It was not for the school, or for the government's peace. It was for the baby. They danced. They sang the old songs of fertility and life. The old drummer beat his drum, and the sound echoed through the valley. A sound of joy, a sound of a future secured. Evelyn, the stranger, the wild teacher, stood in the center of the circle, her hand joined with Cale's. She was no longer a symbol. She was family. She was home. A month later, a supply wagon came through, the last one before the snows would close the passes. The driver, a man she did not know, carried a letter for her. It was thick, heavy, and had postmarks from Santa Fe, from St. Louis, from New York City. She opened it by the light of her fire. It was from a publisher in the East. Dear Miss Hart, it read, we have been following the extraordinary accounts of your adventure with the greatest interest. The story of the wild teacher of the West has captivated the imagination of the nation. We are prepared to offer you a significant advance to write your memoirs, your story of survival, of a civilized woman among the savages, of your capture and eventual triumph, would be an inspiration to all. She read the letter twice. A civilized woman, among the savages, her capture, her triumph. They had it all wrong. They saw her as a captive, a victim who had won. They did not see her as a woman who had chosen. They did not see her as a woman who had found her true self. Cale came in, carrying firewood. He saw the letter in her hand, the strange, distant look on her face. Bad news? He asked. Evelyn looked at him, at his strong face, his kind eyes. She looked at the small cradle he had spent the last week carving, the one that sat by their fire. She looked at the letter.
This voice from a world that was no longer hers.
She smiled, a slow, quiet smile.
She folded the letter. She did not need to write her story. She was living it. She reached out and tossed the paper into the fire.
"No," she said, watching the flames curl the edges of the paper, turning the publisher's words to gray ash. "It was nothing, just a voice from a long time ago. It is not important." She stood and went to him, putting her arms around his waist, laying her head against the scar on his chest.
"I am home."
The snows of many winters fell, and the suns of many summers baked the adobe walls of the schoolhouse into a material as hard and as enduring as the cliffs themselves. The years piled up, quiet and steady, like silt at the bottom of the river. The year 1883 became 1890. 1890 became 1900. The world outside the valley changed. It electrified. It built machines. But in the valley, time moved to the rhythm of the corn growing and the river flowing. Evelyn and Cale grew old. The passage of time was kind to them, etching their story into their faces. Evelyn's hair, once the color of dark honey, turned a soft snow white. The lines around her eyes were not from fear, but from decades of smiling at her pupils. Her hands, once soft and pale, were gnarled and brown. The hands of a woman who had built her life from the mud up. Cale's body, once a lean, hard weapon, softened into the solid, patient strength of a great mountain. His hair, once a river of black, was a brilliant silver, tied back in the old way. He was no longer the warrior. He was the elder, the dying elder, the one the people came to for wisdom, for justice, and for the stories. He walked with a slight limp, a permanent reminder of Jed's bullet. But he walked with a peace that was absolute. Their son was the bridge. His name was James Cale Hart. He had been born in the Hogan, in the dead of that first winter, and he had grown up with his feet in two worlds. He had his mother's sharp, curious mind and her green eyes. He had his father's high cheekbones, his dark skin, and his profound, silent understanding of the land. He spoke English without an accent, and he spoke the Dine language like a prayer. He had gone east, to the university in Santa Fe that Judge Wright had sponsored, and he had come back.
He was the teacher now.
The school was no longer a single, thick-walled room. It was the Academy of Two Worlds. It was a long, low adobe compound that curved with the river. It had a classroom, a small library filled with books sent by a fascinated Judge Wright, and a workshop where Cale still taught the boys to carve, to tan hides. Evelyn, now well into her 60s, sat in her rocking chair by the window of their Hogan. It was a real Hogan, but it had a glass window, a gift from James. From here, she could see the academy. It was a bright afternoon in early autumn. The year 1903, the valley was humming with life. She watched the children pour out of the school for their midday meal. It was a sight that still, after all these years, made her heart ache with a quiet, fierce joy. They were not just Navajo children anymore. As the valley's reputation for peace had grown, others had come, the children of Mexican ranchers, who had fled the troubles to the south, learned beside the Dinah, the sons and daughters of white prospectors, men who had come to the valley not to conquer it but to ask permission to live near it, sat on the same benches. She watched her son, James, emerge. He was tall, like his father, and he was laughing, his arms slung around the shoulders of a small, dusty boy. He was a better teacher than she had ever been. He did not just teach. He was the lesson. He was the harmony. Her gaze drifted from the school, up the side of the canyon, to the high, hidden place where the rocks turned to pine. She thought of the cave. She thought of that first night of the rain, so long ago. She had been another person then, a frightened woman, a stranger, a widow from a soft, green world. She had been so sure of what was right, so sure of her books, her laws, her civilized ideas. This land had stripped her bare. It had taken her husband. It had taken her safety. It had taken her friend Clara. It had taken her school. It had taken everything she thought she was. And, in its place, it had given her everything that she truly was. She remembered the feel of Cale's lips, the taste of salt and rain in the darkness, the kiss of recognition. She remembered the feel of the mud, her hands joined with his, the moment they had become partners. She remembered the terror of Emerson's hatred, and the cold, final weight of Barton Clay's gun in her hands. She had come here to teach. Instead, she had been educated. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act in spite of it. She had learned that law was not what was written on paper, but what was written on the heart. And she had learned that love was not a soft word, but a hard, enduring choice. A choice to build, to fight, to stay. The door of the hogan opened, and the scent of juniper and cold, clean air came in with him. Cale. He was old, but his eyes were the same, dark as volcanic ash, and they still saw straight through her. He was carrying something. "You are staring again, Evelyn," he said, his voice a low, gentle rumble. He had always pronounced her name with the music of his own language. "I am remembering Cale," she said, smiling. "I am remembering the girl who was so afraid of this land." "She was a good girl," he said, sitting on the stool across from her. "But she was not as strong as the woman." He held out his hand. On his scarred, open palm lay a single, perfect eagle feather. It was long, white, with a tip of pure black. It was the last one, the one he had kept from his warrior days, the symbol of his honor, his connection to the sky, to the Great Spirit. "The wind brought it this morning," he said. He did not lie. Not really. The wind had brought it to him 30 years ago. "It is time for it to have a new keeper." She knew what this meant. It was the final, complete surrender of the warrior. He was not just the elder. He was the husband. He was the father. He was the man at peace. He was giving her the last, most sacred piece of himself. She took it, her trembling, aged fingers stroking the smooth, perfect feather. "It is beautiful," she whispered. He put his hand over hers. His skin was like the bark of an old, strong tree. "You are the heart of this valley, Evelyn," he said, his voice quiet. "I am just the bones. I was a man of war. I knew how to protect. I knew how to fight. I knew how to conquer." He looked at her, his eyes full of a lifetime of shared memories, of battles, of loss, of birth. "But you," he said, his voice thick, "you taught the West how to love, not just how to conquer." Tears filled Evelyn's eyes. She held the feather to her chest. That was the truth of it all. He smiled, a slow, gentle smile. He leaned forward and kissed her forehead, a kiss as soft as the feather itself. He left her then, to go and sit with the old men by the river, to smoke, and to watch the sun go down. Evelyn turned back to the small, worn desk in the corner, her journal. It was thick, its pages filled with the ink of 30 years. She had written her story, not for a publisher, but for herself, for James, for the valley. She opened it to the last, blank page. She picked up her pen. Her hand was steady. She dipped it in the ink. She looked out the window. The sun was beginning its glorious death, painting the high cliffs in shades of blood orange and deep purple. It was the blessing, the end of a good day. From the schoolhouse, she could hear the last lesson ending. It was James's voice, leading the children. They were reading, their young voices, Navajo and Mexican and white, all blended into one, clear sound. "This land," they recited, "remembers kindness." Evelyn smiled. She put her pen to the paper. She wrote the last line. As she finished, a new sound drifted on the evening air. It was not the wind. It was not the drum. It was Toma, now a grown man, a leader himself, sitting on the porch of the academy. He was playing his father's flute. The notes were high, clear, and sweet. They spoke of sorrow, and of peace, and of a harmony that was, at last, eternal. The end, but the wind of the west still blows, like a free heart that never sleeps. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We would love to hear your thoughts. Let us know where in the world you are listening from in the comments below. It is always a pleasure to connect with our audience. If you enjoyed this tale, please consider subscribing to our channel, Wild West Tales, and give this video a like. And if you really want to support us, hit that hype button so this story can be heard by even more folks. We appreciate every one of you.